The September 13th, 2022 meeting of the Long Hill Township Planning Board is called to order at 7:34 p.m. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting a copy of the public meeting dates on the municipal bulletin board and website, by sending a copy to the Echo Sentinel newspaper, and by filing a copy with the municipal clerk. Any hearing conducted by the board is a quasi-judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Announcement is made that as a matter of procedure, it is the intention of the planning board not to continue any matter past 10:30 p.m. unless a motion is passed by the members then present to extend the meeting. All in attendance are asked to mute cell phones and any electronic devices as they interrupt the proceeding. We have the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Lahaney, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Committeeman Ray? Absent. Committeeman Verleza? Recused.
Both recused.
Right. Ms. Dill?
Present.
Mr. Hands?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Present.
Mr. Malinowski?
Here.
Mr. File?
Here.
Vice Chairman Richardson?
Here.
Chairman Sandow?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Just for planning purposes, I intend that this hearing will run until 9:55. That's an hour and 20 minutes, or 2 hours and 20 minutes. At 9:55, we will take a break. The board members will get a 5-minute break, and any members of the public who don't want to stay for the last half hour are free to leave. That's usually a little bit confusing time, so we're going to hold a break, have a break there. The last half hour will be board business, which is listed on the agenda. None of it should take very long, and none of it will involve public input. The first item on the agenda tonight is a continued hearing on application number 21-26 Papa, the G2 Development Group, a subdivision on Gates Avenue. By way of history, that application was heard on May 24th. It was continued to June 28th, but the applicant wasn't ready on June 28th, so we canceled that meeting, and the consequence of canceling that meeting was that the board did not come together in order to extend the date for the hearing. So we went into a sort of a limbo through the summer and come back with a new hearing date tonight with new notices. And so from a technical point of view, the clock is sort of restarting. But council advises me that the members who were absent from the May hearing, well, go ahead, tell me what.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, happy to jump in. Yes, first, the matter was re-noticed for this evening. The content of the notice was sufficient and it was timely served, in my opinion. Certified mail September 1, published September 2nd, both at least 10 days prior to this evening. So therefore, the board does have jurisdiction to hear and decide the application. It is a continued hearing from the hearing that commenced on 5/24/2022. 5 of our board members who are here this evening were there for the entirety of that proceeding. The other 2 board members have certified that they have listened to the entirety of the tapes and the transcripts. So they have qualified themselves as well. So the 7 members sitting on the dais, 7 board members sitting on the dais with me this evening are all qualified to hear and decide and vote on the application should the application conclude this evening. I did, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, have a particular instruction I wanted to make with respect to a governing body meeting.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's come to my attention that there were a couple of members of the public who addressed the subject matter of this quasi-judicial hearing on this development application at a recent Township Committee meeting. So I must advise the planning board members that if they are privy to any of the comments that were made by those members of the public at that Township Committee meeting, those comments cannot be considered as evidence because they were not presented under oath during an open public meeting of this planning board at which we were hearing this noticed application. That said, for the members of the public, particularly those two members of the public who made comments at the Township Committee meeting, if you're here this evening, please do, when we have public comment portion, under oath, feel free to make the very same or different or additional comments. They will then be evidence that the board members can consider, and certainly then whoever makes comments under oath can be potentially questioned by any of the board members or the applicant's counsel. But as everyone should know, and I'll remind everyone, these are quasi-judicial proceedings. The board cannot take evidence out of, ex parte, out of these properly noticed quasi-judicial public hearings before the board. So that is the curative instruction. I just want to make sure if any of the board members happen to be privy to those comments that were made outside of this hearing during the Township Committee meeting. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, I think that takes care of all the predicates that I had. Thank you.
Thank you. It's your microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. James First again on behalf of the applicant G2 Development. I present again in continuation of the May 24th hearing with our...
Get closer to the microphone. Can you hear him in the back of the room?
Can you hear me? With our expert, Matt Seckler, who was previously qualified and sworn as both a civil engineer as well as a professional planner. Mr. Chairman, when we were here on May 24th, we had an application that was to take the two lots that currently exist and to attempt to turn those two lots into three non-conforming lots. At that time, because of the three lots and the nature of the size of the lots, there were some 32 variances requested of this board. It was clear that the board was not favorably looking upon that application. There were comments of the public, which were taken into consideration by the applicant. There were comments of the board, which were certainly listened to and taken into consideration by the applicant. We took the summer, reviewed those comments, and presented tonight, or will present tonight, what in essence is technically defined as a subdivision, but the reality is it's 2 lots to 2 lots. The proposal this evening is not for a 3-lot subdivision as previously requested, but simply for a move of the lot line that currently exists so that we have 2 lots which are more in keeping with the size and scope of the lots in the neighborhood. There are 17 variances presented this evening. I only have my one witness, Mr. Seckler, who would provide testimony initially as a civil engineer, and then if the board needed him to supplement his prior testimony as a planner, I would present him for that purpose as well. With that, Mr. Chairman, I call Mr. Matt Seckler as a civil engineer, previously qualified, previously sworn before this board, and I assure you he will tell the truth this whole evening.
Chair, yeah, I just want to have the record reflect, Mr. Seckler, your licenses as a civil engineer in the state of New Jersey and a professional planner in the state of New Jersey, do they both remain in good, remain in effect?
Yes,
In
they
good
do.
standing?
Yes, they do.
Thank you. I'll defer to the chair. I assume the board will continue to accept you as an expert in those 2 fields.
Agreed.
Thank you. So again, just summarizing, we did make a resubmission package to the board. I just want to go through some of the changes that we made in listening to the board and the public regarding the site plan and the proposed changes. One was obviously the intensity of the site. The earlier application, as was mentioned by council, included 3 single-family houses. It's now 2 single-family houses is the new application. Second is the lot size. Now, again, to remind everyone, as our council previously stated, currently this property does consist of 2 lots. It consists of a lot that is 7,362 square feet, and a lot that is 26,346 square feet. One that's clearly undersized per zone, almost a third of the size, and the other one that is slightly oversized per the zone. We previously attempted to cut that up into 3 different lots. I have some exhibits to show, what those were previously. But currently, what we're looking to do is to divide, again, the 2 lots that were one very undersized and one oversized into 2 lots, which I'll say are functionally similar in size. One lot is 17,967 square feet. That is the lot on the left when looking at the plans, or the one to the west. It's called Lot A on our plans. And Lot B would be the one on the corner of Mitchell and Gates. That is 15,742 square feet. I do have an exhibit that I'd like to share with the board to show in comparison purposes where the 2 new lots kind of lay out in terms of all the other lot sizes on the street, and compare that to where we were previously with this application, so.
Mr. Chairman, we're up to, I have Exhibit A1 and 2 last time, so we should be up to A3 unless anyone has different. Hearing none, I think we're at Exhibit A3 is the next one up.
Thank you, and I'm going to hand these out to the board. Yeah. Put them together instead of separate. Just one view.
Mr. Chairman, I'm marking as A3.
I'm also going to put it up on the board, so.
Okay, thank you. We want to make sure the public has a full, fair opportunity to see everything that's being presented this evening.
I think this is sufficient for everyone up here.
Are these all A3?
Yes,
One page?
one page.
Okay, and I'll, average lot size is the heading?
Thanks.
Let me keep one for the chair.
We had one of these at the May hearing. Is this the same chart or an update?
It's,
At least it's got a new date on it.
so. I don't know, a good position to.
I would say turn it more towards the public, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what I've shown is A3, which is the small chart up in the corner here for the public, but the board members all have copies. And A2 is the image that is below, that is what we previously had presented before the board. What A2 showed was where the proposed lot sat in terms of the lot size for all the other lots up and down Gates, up to the Tolbert intersection. The proposed lots, there was a small lot that would have been the 3rd smallest, and then the other 2 lots, which are A and B, would have been the 10th and 11th sized lots out of the 24 lots that would have been created if the board acted favorably upon the previous previous hearing.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, Mr. Seckler. Can the public see the board?
You think it-
Can-
You can move up. I'm sorry.
Turn it more towards them. Turn it,
Yeah.
well, you're so far away, guys.
Yeah.
Feel free to move up.
Thank you. Yeah.
Unlike a Springsteen concert, the front row seats are no more costly than the
I
back.
think I have a couple of handouts I can give you, you guys can pass around. I think I have a couple more extras.
Depends on the TV as well, doesn't it?
Okay, now the
And
small
Mr. Seckler,
inset.
Mr. Seckler, sorry.
Yes.
Just for the record, this is A3 that we're handing out to them.
A3 is what was handed out.
That's the new one. Okay, thank you.
The new one has colors that are blue and red. And what we've attempted to show is where the new lots, now that we've divided them, fit within the lot sizes of the remainder of the street. So now, Lot A is the 18th out of the 23 lots on the street in terms of lot size, 23 being the largest lot. So 18 out of 23 is Lot A, and 15 out of 23 is Lot B. Both lots are greater than the average lot size on the street, about 14,912 square feet, should this application be deemed accepted. To remind everybody, there are only 3 lots on the street that are compliant with the minimum lot size, that is 20,000 square feet. Those are indicated as number 21, 22, and 23. Those are the compliant lots. The other lots, which are the other 20 lots, are all undersized to various amounts. But again, the proposed lots, now that we've eliminated one of the proposed lots and split it up into 2, now are the 15th out of 23 and 18th out of 23 lots on the street. So again, greater than half, and you kind of look at, as they relate to the relative size of the other lots, really, at least in terms of lot size, feel like they fit with the rest of the neighborhood and the rest of the street. So that was this, I don't think this even worked. Okay. So that was the second key aspect that we heard from the board and the public, was related to the lot size, and we believe that we've found a lot size that is more consistent with the neighborhood and street than was previously proposed. Second, you've heard just overall in terms of the amount of variances that were previously requested has gone down by nearly 50%. In addition, we look to reduce the amount of disturbance on the property as well as the amount of disturbance within areas that would be critical or have 15% slopes or greater. The disturbance within critical areas has gone down 20%. The overall disturbance on the property has gone down 17% with the design. In addition, we've added a landscaping plan, which was requested by the board and potentially, I believe, some members of the public. It includes replanting trees along the rear property line. Again, the rear property, I'm considering the properties that back up to Lot 40, which is the lot that fronts on Mitchell Road next to us. So what we've added 11 trees. That includes 6 Norway spruces and 5 green giant arborvitaes. That would be behind Lot A. And then 5 Norway spruces and 6 green giant arborvitaes that would be between Lot B and the adjoining lot to the rear.
So Matt, specifically, there was a member of the public who lived what we'll call in the rear yard here. And it was that person that came and spoke about their concerns with regards to what the visual aspects might be. They also had some concerns about what the drainage effects would be. This landscape plan was an attempt to ameliorate any type of visual impact that the properties might have upon the rear yard neighbors. Is that correct?
That is correct. And again, to remind the board, because of the slope of the property, when you're driving by the house along Gates Avenue, what you'll see is a 2-story house. You basically have a ground floor and a upstairs kind of bedroom floor with a roof. From the rear of the house, because of the slope, we actually have an additional story that is seen from the rear. So again, by planting trees along our property line, in addition, the Lot A, we have a retaining wall that kind of goes around a portion of the backyard and the pool area. That retaining wall will have plants on the low side, so on the neighbor's side of that retaining wall, that will be planted at elevations between 2 feet and 2.5 feet, and obviously could grow beyond that. So basically, if you're behind our site, or you'll see the row of trees, so you'll have 11 trees. Then you'll have,
Heights of those trees, what are the sizes of those?
they'll be planted about 5 to 6 feet, typically grow about 2 feet per year. So they'll be 5 to 6 feet along the property line. Then you'll have an area of, basically lawn or backyard. Then you'll have the plantings that'll be more kind of shrubs and bushes. Those will be planted at a height of about 2 to 2.5 feet. Then you'll have the retaining wall. So you are not seeing, it's not like you're on a farm and you're seeing a house that the whole distance that's 3 stories high. You're basically looking at trees, bushes, then a portion of a retaining wall on your way up to the house. So again, we look to, again, help mitigate the fact that from the rear side of the house, you'll see the extra story as opposed to from the front, where you'll see just a standard two-story house.
And from the front of the lot and to the rear of the lot, how much of a slope do we have?
Yeah, and again, just to remind the board, when you're at the existing driveway, or at the location where the driveway is, you're at elevation 264. In the rear of the site, you're around elevation 250 or 249. So again, you're talking about something that could be 14 or 15 feet, just in natural elevation between the front of the site and the back of the site.
But as I drive by the front of the house, I'm gonna see what appears to be a two-story Center Hall colonial style home, correct?
Exactly, yes.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, is that only Lot A you're referring to right now?
Well, they both have similar elevations, but in terms of the additional retaining wall in the rear, that is just Lot A.
But we will have the plantings along Lot B as well, correct?
We will have the plantings along Lot B. Lot B does not require an additional retaining wall between the rear property line and the house. Because of the way that house lays out, the slope, again, is a little different on that part of the parcel, and therefore it wouldn't need that style retaining wall. But again, you would still get the benefit of the plantings that'll be, again, planted at 5 to 6 feet, and then again, grow over, about 2 feet a year. So, by year 3, you're looking at things that could be around 10 feet tall.
And if I understand correctly, Lot B does not require a height variance because it's 2 stories, 30 feet. It's only Lot A that requires the height variance at 3 stories, 38 feet. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Sheckler, just to be clear on that, the height variance is essentially only in the rear of the property, again, because as we drive by 2 stories from the front, but the technical reading of the ordinance here requires us to state that that is a 3-story home, because in the rear yard, it elevates to a certain height.
Yeah, and again, also as the building is measured by their definition for building height, we take the elevations around the foundation to the highest point. So we do have, again, if it was a flat site, flat front to back, and we stuck this house on it and didn't have a kind of use the basement as somewhat a way to deal with the change in elevation, we likely would have been compliant with height. In
If
both
I may, you
cases.
have no objection to the ordinance language, nor that you have any objection to the interpretation of the ordinance, correct?
Not at all, no.
Thank you.
As was mentioned, again, in dealing with the height, we obviously are utilizing a series of retaining walls on the property. Actually, this might be easier to show the public with the board, so. let me get up again.
Is that microphone even working?
You've got to wait for it to turn green.
Now it's green? Good, okay.
Mr. Seckler, while you're putting that up, you mentioned that the driveway, the elevation on Lot A was 254, and what was the rear?
249. It was 264 and 249.
264?
264, yes. So I'm using sheet C3 from the submitted site plan package, and I'm concentrating on Lot A, which is the lot that is furthest from the corner.
And if I may, just to be clear, the last revised date on that, is that August 30, 2022, the most recent?
That is correct, yes.
And that need not be marked as an exhibit because it was submitted more than 10 days in advance of this evening. But again, please, members of the public, make sure you can see if you don't have that handy for yourselves.
Yep. And just to illustrate, and the reason why I'm using this is we do have a variance as it relates to the walls in the front yard. So I just want to go over how they kind of grow in size and the purpose for them. So the wall that is on the western side of Lot A, there's a wall that basically is in line with the western limit of that house. That wall starts out at basically an elevation of 0 or just coming out of the ground, and by the time you get to the house, the wall would have a 6-foot high elevation. Again, it starts off very low in the front yard, basically coming out of the ground. We may design, it'll be decorative in nature, could have kind of a stepped approach to it, but would be 6 feet at its highest point, which is where it meets the house itself. We are proposing for fall protection, right now, a decorative aluminum fence, but again, we are open to whatever style fence the board wishes to help prevent fall protection in that area. What this wall does is, one, it helps with the change in grade, but two, it allows us to protect some of the trees, vegetation, and grading that exists between our property and the neighbor that is located to our west. We probably could eliminate that wall if we were to regrade that entire area, but that would require removal of additional trees. So our goal here was to put a wall in to help eliminate the need to disturb more area and mature trees. Next, there are two walls located to the eastern side of the driveway. The wall that is closest to the driveway, similar to the walls that were discussed before, start about 1 feet near the property line and will climb to about 7 to 8 feet as it digs and ties into the house. So again, this is not an 8-foot-high continuous wall in the front yard. Basically starts at a 1-foot wall, and as we kind of have some steps that go around the side of the house to help make the side yard and rear yard a little more usable and a little more flat, we do have a wall that will reach a 7 to 8 foot elevation as it ties into the side of the house. And then the last wall on Lot A, that is the wall that is located between Lot A and Lot B. That wall never reaches a height of greater than 4 feet. It basically starts as approximately a 3 or 3.5 foot wall, goes around the property at 4 and about 2.5.
Battery die?
It's back on now, but I'll talk fast.
That's not
Goes
bad.
back to about, goes into 2.5 feet near the rear of the wall. And again, this is the wall, this 4, 3.5, 4 foot walls, the one that'll have the plantings on the low side or on the neighbor's side. That'll have the shrubs on the low side, and we planted at 2.5 feet high, 2.5 feet high. And again, we do have, as per our landscaping plan, the trees along the rear property line. So I just wanted to explain how the walls work, because we do have a variance for the retaining walls in the front yard. I just want to explain again, they're not 8 foot high, 7 foot high walls continuous. They start at 1 foot and they climb basically and tie into the house itself.
Am I correct then, though, that there are 2 retaining walls in the front yard of Lot A that are, require the variance relief, one up to 6 feet and one up to 8 feet?
That is correct.
Okay. And Lot B?
With the fall protection on top, though, that's going to be exceeded, is that correct?
Correct. The fall,
What's the total?
well, it would be an additional 4 feet on top of that.
4 feet on top.
4 feet fall
Yeah.
protection on top of the numbers you gave us?
Correct.
The plans had indicated 10 feet and 11.75 feet, but testimony, if you have an 8-foot-high fence with 4 feet, that's going to be closer to 12. Should that request be modified slightly from 11.75 to 12 feet?
I might have been rounding on my wall height, but let's take the 12, and if we need the extra 3 inches, we'll take it.
Thank you for clarifying.
And again, the style of fence, we've shown a aluminum decorative fence. Again, we would think there'd be a preference to be able to see through it, which is why we chose that. But again, we're open to whatever the board wishes in terms of the nature of the fence type that'd be utilized for fall protection. In addition, we do have a fence around the pool. We've designed both of these properties with a pool. Doesn't mean that the property owner is necessarily going to put a pool in. We wanted to make sure we were able to accommodate one. Both pools are designed to meet the ordinance, meaning that it follows the required setback requirements. Also, we'll have a 4.5 foot high fence around with a self-latching gate. That's all what is required per the ordinance as it relates to pools. So that is how we've designed these 2 sites.
I'm sorry if I may, Mr. Chairman, but is there a wall, one or more walls in the front yard of Lot B that exceed the, if I'm not mistaken, 4-foot maximum permitted? Or are they both on Lot A?
They're both on Lot A.
Okay, and, all right, I just want to make mention that there, Liz may want to double-check the memo.
I have it correct.
Oh, I have Lot B, 8.5 feet, I have one on Lot A and one on Lot B. Unless it was updated, the memo. Maybe I have an older version.
I don't know, but it says that they're proposing 11 and a half foot, which is now 12 feet and 10 feet on the front yard of Lot A, and that Lot B complies.
Okay, yeah, if you look at, okay, yeah. I'm look, in the bold, it's correct. Before that, it might not be, but that's fine. I got it.
That's the old letter.
That's the old letter, and that
Yes.
was a different design.
Yeah.
Thank you. My apologies.
So-
Let the record reflect Liz is correct as always. My apologies.
Sorry, Mr. Warner. Mr. Steckler, just from a curb appeal on the 2 retaining walls on Lot A from the street view, you're saying you're putting a fall protection fence up there. So I'm going to see from the street 1 fence on the first tier and then another fall fence on the second tier, so I could be looking at 2 fences? Is that,
On the double fence, I believe that the fence is actually only necessary on the inner wall, the one closest to the driveway, because that has the higher
that's the
elevation.
one that goes to 8 foot?
Yes, that one
And the
needs,
6 foot is not going to have, so it's only going to be,
no, there are 3 walls on Lot A.
Yep.
2 of them need the fall protection fence, 1 does not.
2 needs, so the 2 that need the fall
Yep.
protection from the street, I'm going to see 2 fences at 2 different tiers,
Correct, but they're on different sides of the house, so it's not,
left and the right, so if I'm seeing
Exactly.
one right, one left.
yes, yep, not
It will be
simultaneous.
Not
fence
one
and then
stacked on-
fence.
Right,
Okay,
yep.
thank you.
Again, I know that I honestly, I have a house that has a wall around my driveway. It is 5, 6 feet. There's no fall protection, but I understand the request for a fall protection fence. I see it in more public areas, but again, I understand that it is likely a good safety measure to have.
Thank you.
So again, I have one last exhibit, and I think I only have a large scale of it, so I'm going to have to move it around, I think, but essentially what it will show, and I'll get up and show it.
Sorry, while you're walking up there, you mentioned pools. Are these in-ground project? I know it's by design. Are they designed in-ground or above ground?
They were designed to be in-ground.
Thank you.
I believe we're up to Exhibit A4.
And I'll start by showing the board, and I'll turn it to the public. I'll tell you what this is in a second. A4 is an aerial photograph of the area from a Google image that was, Near Map, which is a different website that provides aerial photographs. The image was from March 21st, 2021. And what we've overlaid is the site plan as it relates to the houses and the improvements that would be on the 2 properties proposed. Again, it may be difficult to see from this distance and likely when I turn around to the public, but the intention was to show how these houses and lot sizes fit in with the rest of the neighborhood. That if you saw from an aerial image in terms of where these houses are proposed to be placed, in terms of their front yard setbacks, in terms of side yards, rear yards, building sizes, that it fits with the rest of the neighborhood. So again, I'd be happy to bring it closer and turn it around if that helps. I don't know if that's,
Yeah, Matt, let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's bring it closer, let's show the board, and then we'll walk it out to the public.
so again, this is A4, and the intention was to show the 2 houses on the 2 lots as it relates to the aerial image of the existing neighborhood.
Are the walls there? I think I see them.
The walls are here, and here is the other large wall, and this is the smaller wall that goes around.
Thank you.
So while council walks around with the image, I just want to reiterate that, again, this application, the goal or the changes that we made took, again, what is existing, a very undersized lot, an oversized lot, essentially split them generally down the middle because the property is not a pure rectangle, it's not completely balanced. to put two lots that are consistent, at least in lot size, with the other houses in the neighborhood. We reduced the amount of disturbance, both in the critical slope areas and on the site overall. We've looked to landscape the property appropriately to help mitigate any of the issues that were raised in terms of either this building's proposed building height or perception of this building from an adjacent property, and to provide, obviously, privacy from the nearby properties to this lot as well. So overall, I think that the changes that we made, the goal was to, again, listen to the board, listen to the public, and make changes that would be consistent, or create a development that would be more consistent with the neighborhood that exists today for this proposed development.
Well, is that the end of your direct testimony?
Unless council says otherwise.
Say again?
Mr. Chairman, council seems to be having a discussion with members of the public.
Mr. Warner,
I think he's telling him he has to ask.
Mr. Warner, I do have a
Yeah,
question
that's
for Mr.
okay, I
Sackler.
trust him.
I do have a question.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we have questions from board members of Mr.
Yeah, we're
Sackler's.
gonna get to that in a minute, but I just want to be sure his testimony is finished.
Yes.
Okay, at this point, the board's professionals are going to ask questions as relates to the reports that they have submitted. And I'd like to start with Ms. Anello, because I haven't heard anybody talk about water issues, and I know she's got a lot to say about water issues. So I would like you to start walking through your report and ask the questions that need to be asked, and I will ask the members of the board to chime in one question at a time as we walk through this, so that everything doesn't bunch up to the end. So let's make sure that we dispose of each item on Ms. Anello's report one at a time as we get to it. After that, I will open up the meeting to questions from members of the public, although I caution you now, please pay attention that to the questions that are asked by the board's professionals and by the board members, because there's no reason for you to ask a question that has already been asked. So let's be sure that you filter the questions that you're going to be asking to matters that haven't been discussed. Mike,
Mr. Chairman, just so you know, I'm viewing the report on my phone because we only have one copy. I wouldn't want you to think I was texting or doing something else.
Oh, I don't care what you do. I'm not paying you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Seckler, I guess rather than jump into some of the comments, I think it would be probably best if you start off with some testimony to get some on the record of what the proposed stormwater management is for the site, how you've revised the grading since the last submission, how this is an improvement, in your opinion, if it is, upon the stormwater control and the grading upon last time, and there were several discussions last time on stormwater management, and you discussed how, as part of your full design, you would do a groundwater analysis and the like, and, has that analysis been done? Has there been any preliminary investigation, soil testing and the like? So I'll have you answer those first, and then we'll go back to some more specifics.
Certainly. We did obviously revise the grading plan, which is how we ended up with the walls and the locations we did versus where the walls were previously located. Also, one of the things we did is the finished floor elevation of the building on Lot A, the house on Lot A, actually went down about 1.5 feet. So we did try to bring down the elevation of what was the taller building, or the one that needs the height variance, another 1.5 feet, just by grading differently between the street and the house itself. We are continuing to anticipate a design using a seepage pit for this property. We would tie in, obviously, necessary roof leaders, as well as we've directed the grading to get to the potential seepage pit on Lot A. Lot B utilizes a swale and a seepage pit as well. One of the design criterias for a seepage pit is obviously to do some soil testing. We've performed the soil, well, we have not. We've hired someone to perform soil testing. We don't do that as one of our services. We, as much as I've tried, have not been able to get the results back yet to perform the official design. So again, that would be pending, but obviously the size of the seepage pit design would be obviously contingent on the type of soils that we get in the area. So again, we've just marked out a potential area, but it is possible that the seepage pit may need to be larger, again, depending on the calculations and the soil results that we get back. But again, we've conducted the test, but we have not yet gotten the results yet to be able to finalize any type of design.
And because you haven't gotten those soil tests back, the groundwater mounding analysis was not complete at this time yet? Is that
Correct, yes,
We
correct.
don't have that information as well?
Correct.
Mr. Seckler, regardless of the size of the seepage pits, they wouldn't be seen from the neighbors. There would be no aesthetic impact. Those would all be underground improvements, correct?
Correct, and again, we do have the trees that are between, especially in Lot A, between our property line and the seepage pit itself, but I understand, the board engineer's comment about, the groundwater mounding analysis looks at how groundwater changes underground. So you may not see it, but it still exists, but yes, we would perform that once the soil samples come back.
And the applicant would comply with Long Hill Township Code Section LU 146.3F requiring roof gutter protection.
Yes, that is true.
For the board and the public, could you explain a little bit, how, you've explained that they will be designed in accordance with the code. What is the code? How much water do you intend to hold in these dry wells? Kind of give an idea of what that means.
Well, again, obviously, as it relates to this application, in terms of lot coverage, we are compliant on the A lot. We are slightly over lot coverage on the B lot. In both cases, we are disturbing a level of ground here that currently is undisturbed or has previously not been disturbed for a long time. So obviously there is a level of there's a level of groundwater, of runoff that we need to get back into the groundwater in this area. The point of the design is not to have rainwater hit our house, go through a pipe, and then spill onto the property next to us. The idea is that we want to retain and get water back into the ground at our property where the water naturally goes today or generally goes there today. So again, we obviously would have to comply with the latest DEP and municipal standards as it relates to stormwater management. Again, we understand that we need to follow the latest best management practices, which is why we have a seepage pit as part of this design. Again, our design will comply with the latest requirements, which includes the groundwater recharge as well as not having that groundwater mounding analysis affect the neighboring properties.
Looking at the design standards for the code, it's the capacity has to be 4 inches of runoff for each square inch of increased impervious area. So in this case, it would be the impervious area proposed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And 4 inches of runoff, is that approximately equal to what storm event? In Morris County, off the top of my head, that's about the 5-year storm event?
Yeah, I was going to say it's more than a 2.
More than a 2,
not
less
10.
than 10, somewhere in between those 2 storm events. So the idea here is that these seepage pits would fully capture the 4 inches of runoff, so about the 5-year storm event. What happens during those larger storm events?
During those larger storm events, the water would generally go honestly where they would go today, in terms of the fact that, this property does have a natural grade today. It's high in the front, low in the back. So when water hits this property on, if you have a soaked ground like you have, this morning or last night, you have rainwater, it eventually works itself down stream or down elevation, which would obviously be the properties to the rear of the site. Again, what we're doing is holding back that 4 inches no matter what, and then so whatever would get to that neighboring property would be less than what happens there today.
There's some suggestions in my letter regarding the use of some additional lawn drains, and that's in order to, you've described that you have some swales proposed on the property. Would the applicant be amenable to including these additional lawn inlets? And again, the idea here is to, when the water goes into these swales and goes around the foundations, capture it and take it more toward the dry wells so we can get that away from the neighboring properties.
Yes, and again, we do also have an area on Lot A in which we have a low point on one side of a wall, so obviously we'd have to provide, a connection, whether through seepage holes, through the wall, long drains, something like that, so the water from the one side of the wall could get to the seepage pit on the other side of the wall.
So,
The
what,
applicant would certainly comply with paragraph 20 of your September 9th letter.
excellent, thank you.
It's paragraph 20, thank you.
So,
Say that again, say that again.
I said the applicant would comply with paragraph 20, the proposals in the engineer's letter dated September 9th of 2022.
Thank you.
So kind of as it relates to that comment is, the areas on the plans where you have the dry wells proposed, seepage pits, dry wells, kind of an interchangeable term there, I apologize for using them both. They seem to be close to neighboring lot 40. And I believe that was one of the concerns from that neighboring property owner last time. Can you explain why and how you arrived on those locations for the seepage pits? If there was alternate locations on the site that were reviewed, why or why not those were feasible? And, kind of how we got to these areas.
Yeah, again, water likes to go downhill, so you typically want to collect the water where it's going, which would be down the hill. So that is why they're located, I would say, in the rear of the site or closer to lot 40 than closer to the street, just because of the natural grade of the road. We can't put a seepage pit in the front because it's not going to capture any of the water that runs to the back of the site. There is a potential option for the seepage pit for lot B, which is the one in the corner, through some regrading if necessary. And again, this would be contingent on the groundwater mounding analysis if it's needed to move it further from the property line. We probably could move it a little bit north, closer to the driveway if necessary to require a little bit of a grading change. But that would be the remedy for that site. But again, that's the natural progression of the topography is for the water on this site, even today, even with, or when the house was active on the site previously, was water would work itself to the back and eventually onto lot 40.
Should the groundwater mounding analysis show negative impacts to lot 40 from the location of that dry well on lot B, and you did need to redesign it so it was further north, closer to the driveway, would that have any impacts that would affect any of the variances sought today? Would that require any additional retaining walls that we haven't seen today, or anything that's kind of beyond the scope of what we're looking at now, with the, exception that, some of the topography lines might change around a little bit?
I think lot B, we would be able to design without any front yard retaining walls that would require a variance if that would have to move. So I believe, I'm confident that B can be moved. And in lot A, the seepage pit could possibly move kind of up a little bit, closer to the front yard, but it does need to be on the downside of the site. And that, again, would not require any new variances if that seepage pit has to move.
I think those are all my questions related to stormwater management. Mr. Chair, would you like to stick on some of the other engineering topics, or do you want to go to the board
No,
for
go
some
ahead.
questions?
Just wanna ask
Any
one follow-up.
member of the board have anything on stormwater?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Sackler, for your presentation. Couple of questions. On the study that we
Have you
don't
got
have the
are you
results-
using a mic?
Probably not close enough. With regards to the investigations that were performed that we don't have the results, can you give me a sense of what was some of the methodology used? Were there test pits, soil borings, both?
I believe test pits were used. Again, we don't perform them, so they're not under my direction.
No, I
yeah,
understand.
yeah.
I'm just curious if
Yep.
you could give me an overview of what investigation was performed by presumably a geotechnical engineer.
Yep,
Do you have a sense of what they,
I believe there were either 2 or 4 test pits taken in the area in order to perform both, and again, I'm not a geotechnical engineer, so I may not get the terminology correct, but I think the idea was that it was to do a groundwater analysis to determine, one, the type of soil. If it's clay, if it's rock, that's obviously, we need to see if there's a refusal, if we were,
well, that's where I was kind
Yeah.
of going. Did you
Yeah.
get a sense of, was
I haven't
rock
s-
encountered?
I haven't
or-
seen anything from the subconsultant, so I can't speak to one way or the other if there is rock in the area or not.
Okay. And then just to follow up, on these seepage pits, what sort of operation and maintenance would be required of these pits of an owner? Should these be installed?
Yeah, again, there obviously is maintenance as with, again, it's not a, I would say, a high maintenance item. It's not something like, some pervious pavers where you have to vacuum things out, twice a year. But there is, usually a pretty standard maintenance.
I mean, do they have to be pumped out to relieve
No.
sediment?
No. No.
What is typically the?
It generally, the reason why it's usually used, especially in single-family houses, that's usually a set it and forget it type of operation. That said, just like anything, silt and things could kind of build up. You could get, leaves and things like that, that kind of, could tie up some of the system, which is, again, one of the reasons why I believe there was a request for some guards
Yep.
on the gutters type of thing, just to kind of keep stuff like that out of the system. So again, it's as close to a set it and forget you can get for drainage, but again, things could always utilize, a cleaning every once in a while.
And then my final question, with the adjacent lot, did you evaluate that structure? Does that structure have a basement on the north side of the property that might be impacted by groundwater mounding?
I did not, but obviously, as part of a groundwater mounding, we need to show that we don't affect that property at all. So whether they have a basement or not, we'd have to show that we don't have an influence on that adjoining lot with our new design.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When do you expect that report?
I was told that we were supposed to get it a week and a half ago, but I still haven't gotten it. What?
It's 10 days late.
Yes.
All right, well, that's not good.
No.
I hope you're going to give them a phone call today and tomorrow to find out what's going on with that.
I will.
With that being said, when the report comes in, if there's a negative, what we don't want to do is cause a negative impact to Lot 40. And truth be told, I did go visit Lot 40 on a day that had rained the previous night, and there was substantial water already being poured onto that property. And I also believe that there was, they were negatively impacted. So I'm looking to figure out how can we improve and maybe even better that situation. Definitely do not want a negative impact there. So if these wells do not, these seepage wells or seepage pits are not capable of handling, or you can't do anything in the ground, what other options are there?
Yeah, so thinking of other options, well, one, and I think this may not even have any relation to the seepage pit, but could be an alternative, would be potentially doing some sort of, when we do the planting of the trees along the back, we can look at elevating them slightly and basically having a swale on our side of the property, so that, again, at least it's not, water isn't necessarily being directly on the property. There's at least another physical elevation change between our lot and their lot, that we'd be able to at least capture some of that runoff, again, in a swale that would be located on our side of the property line. So that is an alternative, regardless if, the results look good or bad. That is something that helps direct it. But again, as you mentioned, that's the natural flow of water. So again, us trying to do anything here would obviously be improvement over what you were seeing out there. Another alternative, again, that we could look at is, try various means of keeping, while that location may not be the best for groundwater, there may be, perhaps the front of the site may be better. And again, I know we mentioned the water wants to get to the back, but it's possible we could use some sort of pervious material either on the front walkways or the driveways and things like that, just to help reduce the amount of runoff that gets to the rear property line as well. Again, that assumes that the front part of the lot has some, ability to absorb the stormwater, some underground material that is more beneficial. We could also, again, oversize these seepage pits. Again, you oversize them, you have, they're filled with stone with voids, at least it's holding something back, even if the water isn't getting directly into the soil because of, stone or clay or something like that. But again, it would be another means to help prevent the runoff that you saw, again, with no development without this development on the site.
Current status.
Yeah.
So there is a storm drain to the east,
Yes.
southeast corner of Lot 2, or Lot B, is there any way to tie into that through the back of that property? The back of both Lot A and Lot B, to help take that water away and put it into the stormwater system?
It's going to be tough with the elevations, but are you talking about the one that's located in the northeast corner or the south?
I think it's at the
The
southeast
south-
corner.
Okay.
Yeah, along Mitchell.
Yeah, along Mitchell, okay, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the one on the north, there's no way we could get the
No,
elevation
no,
up that
no,
point.
no,
The
but
one to the south,
The lowest point
yeah, yeah,
on both
yeah,
properties.
it's possible that at least the Mitchell, the corner lot B, we might be able to get a tie into that location. I'm not sure if we could get A all the way over there with the proper elevation, the slope, to basically meet into the invert of the existing inlet. But again, that is obviously an option that we could explore, and I think we would be willing if that's what's necessary.
And any option, obviously, to tie into the stormwater system would have to include an analysis to make sure the existing system could handle it. A lot of times, these pipes are older, they're undersized to handle the capacity of the rain that's already there. So sometimes putting this additional drainage might require off-site improvements, enlarging of the pipes and things. And, to Mr. Seckler's point with some alternatives that he spoke about, another common method that we see when the soils are not suitable or you have higher ledge rock or higher groundwater than you anticipate, there are shallow detention systems that we can also use. They're more like chambers. You see these under parking lots a lot of times. You might have seen them on larger developments. And again, as Mr. Steckler stated, these would hold back a lot of the water. They might not infiltrate as much, but they'll still hold back a lot of it on these smaller storm events and things like that. So that's just another suggestion to look at, is the shallow chamber systems, again, used frequently when you have shallow groundwater or shallow bedrock.
Thank you. With all the changes that you're trying to do with the topology of these properties, I am concerned with how that water is going to make its way across that property and how it's going to affect the neighbors nearby. Along the back of those properties are also several very large trees. And some of them, I think, are ash trees that are dead now. I think you had mentioned that those will probably be removed. But there's one or two really, really large trees that are right on the property line. If you're going to start disturbing that area, putting in seepage pits and whatnot, what is the game plan for those trees?
So we do have on sheet C2, in your package is the demo plan, which shows the limit of disturbance. So obviously there are, again, I don't know specifically which trees you're talking about, but any tree that we show on there that has an X through it is obviously a tree that would be removed. The trees that are without an X through it are to be would remain and obviously be supplemented with the trees that we're planting along the property line.
Okay. All right. So I would like to considerations of taking a look at those trees. So because there's two that you have X's around, and maybe 3 or 4, where the old garage is right now, and there seems to be a seepage pit that's going in there. Once you start disturbing that ground, that tree is going to be undermined, and we don't want anything to happen with that tree falling on a property or just falling, period.
Yeah, there are 4 trees that are located behind the existing garage that were slated to be removed as part of the design. So it's possible it was one of those trees or 2 of those trees that you're referring to. They do seem to be somewhat substantial trees. I'm seeing a 40-inch measurement in terms of the trunk size on one of them.
That's the one I'm mostly concerned with. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else have any water-related questions?
Yeah, a few actually. So maybe just in plain English, you can explain how the water will be managed into the pit.
So water that hits the roof gets tied in with a pipe underground to the seepage pit. Seepage pit is basically underground chamber filled generally with stone, with the hope that it would direct water into the ground if we don't have rock, shallow groundwater, or clay. Water that hits the lawn is graded in a way to generally work itself naturally to that same point. That becomes like the low point for the property.
Okay. So mechanically, you're going to take it from basically the property, the house, right? And any impervious surface.
Correct.
Right.
That said, like the driveway on B, that one.
Just focus on A for a minute.
Okay.
I think. Just focus on A. what concerns me is the west side of A. And this whole funneling, I'm going to use the word funneling, of the water down, and this is the surface water, it's not the impervious water. And how that's going to find its way to the seepage pit, which I don't actually think is much above the bottom of that grade. Right? So my fear is, and that western edge is, obviously closest to the road, and that the roads come downhill, and it slants north to south. Yes, there's a slight buffer. I just get concerned that you're starting to take a small, an area critical slope, and you're refining it or defining it a far smaller size. I just wonder how much water is coming down there naturally, and now it's going to be funneled, I think, more pointedly to the west of the property. And I don't see how it's going to go, frankly, north into the seepage pit, because it's on about the same level, the seepage pit to the north, the southwest of the property.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that, again, as your board engineer mentioned, maybe the use of yard drains or something like that to kind of capture most of that runoff, maybe right before it hits its lowest point on the left side or the west side of that.
Yard drains doesn't sound very large enough, personally, without doing the analysis. You're going down, I don't know, whatever, it's 15 feet perhaps. You've already said it goes down 8 feet to the wall.
Yeah.
6 feet to the wall at the front of the house, then it's got at least 10. So about 15, you've probably got a 15-foot drop without doing the math.
Yeah, it's 15 feet on the west side of Lot A.
I just think a larger scale rainfall is going to funnel water at more of a force than the seepage pit's going to be able to find. Right, so I'm just curious about your analysis, of groundwater analysis, what things does it take account of to determine whether that is sufficient? Because my gut reaction is not. And I could argue a little bit on the other side as well, but more so on that side.
Yeah, I mean, the grades are naturally steeper on the western side of Lot A.
Correct.
Again, our hope was not to disturb as much of that area because there are trees and buffers, so we were using the natural grade and just, leaving it alone, and it's, runoff has been going over that area, obviously, through last night's storm and, day before storm, through that spot. Again, we could look to intercept, some of that, possibly creating a flatter landing, to intercept some of that and maybe piping it, to the seepage pit.
How much of analysis would be needed to do something that's probably a bit more realistic than a 4-year flood?
I mean,
4-inch flood.
the time to do the analysis, like, personally, is no more, you just change the intensity of the storm and you can figure out what size.
And the analysis, is that done with consideration of the redevelopment, or is that current state?
Yes, yep.
And we haven't talked about impervious coverage yet, have we? So we'll come to that later.
No, we should probably, I would tie it in with this topic. I think it's a good time to bring it up.
So I'll let you go there first. So that's my concern. But I just don't know if trying to funnel the water, I think, and I use the word funnel, because I don't think it's exactly what's going to happen, down the west side, and how that's going to get dissipated prior to going onto the property below. Does that make sense?
Yeah, again, and what I'm thinking of is, at elevation on the left side near 258, 257, is potentially creating a flatter area in that spot where it's, and then, again, utilizing that flat area to collect the water.
Yeah, I just don't know how big a floodplain you need for that sort of gradient above and the amount of water that could come down, whether that's going to be sufficient of a floodplain to...
Right, I mean, that's the analysis that would have to be performed, yes.
So that would be... And I could argue the same a little bit on the other side, less so perhaps because it's less steep perhaps, and it feeds more directly into the seepage pit than the west side does.
Right.
And I think it's worth noting too, during Mr. Seckler's analysis, you don't need to only have one seepage pit on the site.
Right.
They could be multiple. We can have one on the left corner of the house, one on the right corner of the house, and, that might be necessary in this situation because we have such steep slopes on either side. So instead of one large seepage pit where everything goes to, you might end up with two smaller ones on opposite corners or, something similar of that nature. Some other mechanisms in swales are not grass-lined swales, but stone-lined swales, depending on the velocities through there. So when Mr. Seckler does his analysis, they would look at the velocities, and if it's at such a level that it could create erosion, then you would implement stone-lined swales, so you wouldn't have erosive velocities through that area. So that's, some other considerations to look at, but just wanted to kind of put that out there, that sometimes you split these things up and don't always concentrate your seepage pits or dry wells in one area of the site.
And of course, just practically speaking, we're going to work with your engineer, who obviously has a lot of skill and knowledge in the area. We've seen it ourselves, so I think when working with your town engineer, I'm sure a plan would come up that would alleviate most of your situations. I mean, if there was a 5-inch storm and we're taking 4 inches out of that and putting it in seepage pits, it's really an improvement to that neighborhood. So we'll work even harder to do something more than that.
Seepage pits, as a matter of interest, what's any boundary concerns with the neighbouring properties, limit? Or is it underground, it doesn't really matter?
We generally recommend, an appropriate setback from, 5 to 10 feet from the neighboring property lines, but it really all depends on the groundwater mounding analysis. You could put it very close to the property line if you're going to have zero impact on your neighbor's, underground features and everything. You start to move it further away if there is an impact. That way that underground mound doesn't affect your neighbor. So it's a little bit more, in the nitty-gritty details of where exactly you place it. There are, however, requirements between the setback between seepage pits or dry wells and pools. So it can't be, is it 50 feet or is it 25 from a pool?
I thought it was 25, but
Yeah, I
I'll
think
double
it's-
check.
I could double check that for you right now, but there are setback requirements. This lot does not have a septic system. If you had a septic, there would be very stringent setbacks between them, but in this case, we really just have to worry about the pools. And
Yes,
again,
that's
these
good.
aren't proposed to be built, these are just if future owners want to put them.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so if they did future build them, then you'd have to potentially move them, the
Well,
seepage pit,
That's why we've located where they are.
currently,
Yes, currently, yeah.
Correct.
not
Yeah.
necessarily
Correct.
based upon analysis.
Is that all you have, David?
Yes, that's fine. That's
30
fine.
Do you
feet.
have any?
Between a
I have
seepage pit
engineering
and a swimming
questions,
pool
but
is
not
30 feet.
necessarily water runoff questions.
Say that again?
I said I have engineering questions, but not necessarily water runoff
Well,
questions.
go ahead with the engineering question.
Okay. First question on Lot B. What's the area of the patio on the left-hand side of the house, including the pool? I couldn't figure it because it's in an arc.
Irregular shape, yeah, and
Yeah.
so,
I know you must have done the
yes,
calculation.
I did the calc. I
Okay.
only have the total, so I don't have the number, and the chairman warned me not to say I think before any answers tonight. So I'm going to say I don't specifically know. I know the pool itself is 227 square feet because I put that on the plan.
Right.
So I could only say, I would just then use that shape and do a rough measurement, but the chairman warned me, no, I thinks tonight.
Okay, but just from looking at the drawing, the patio looks to be at least twice the size of the pool, right? Or at least as big as the pool.
Correct. One of the things we were contending with is that the pool has to be at least 15 feet from the house itself.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
That's fine.
Yep.
All right, so here's the question. If the pool is 227 and the patio is probably equal that or more, it's about 500 square feet, right?
Correct, yes.
You're looking for a variance of 1,079 square feet for lot coverage on that property. You could reduce that by half if you got rid of the patio and the pool.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And you still have a deck on the opposite side of the house, right? Proposed elevated wooden deck?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's the first question. So if you eliminated the pool and the patio, you could reduce your variance by a half.
Yes.
Second question, if you did eliminate the patio and the pool, you could then move the house on Lot B closer to the house on Lot A and reduce the variance for the rear yard setback, since the property line runs at an angle. Is that correct?
Which, you're talking about Lot B?
Yeah. Yeah,
Well-
if you took the pool away, you could move the house, the whole house and the driveway to the left or to the west, closer to Lot A.
If I move it close to Lot A, though, the driveway is going to get longer, and I'm going to have the impervious coverage will pop back up on me. That's honestly, a lot of the impervious coverage issue with that lot comes
Okay.
from
So
having
you're-
it 50 feet
So you're
back.
trading impervious coverage for rear yard setback?
Well, I think it's
In effect.
front, I think it's front yard on that lot. That lot, it does not have the rear yard, I don't believe has a rear yard setback. Liz?
Well, it
Just-
is, it's
It's a corner
I believe
lot
It's 14.8 feet
from,
from the corner of the deck, right?
yes, I'm sorry, it's from the road, though. Because it's a corner lot, it actually doesn't have a rear yard.
Okay,
Yeah, so,
all right.
It's got two fronts.
right, so I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I get the road right.
Okay,
Sorry,
thank
yes, it's
you.
14 feet from gates.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that lot would benefit from actually, that house would benefit from actually moving closer to Lot 40, but we wanted to give it more separation from the
Okay.
neighbor.
Right, that's my question.
Yeah, and again, just to reiterate, because we were holding the front yard setback from Mitchell being 50 feet back, we got this really long driveway, which is why we have the impervious, well, I don't say why. It's one of the reasons why we have the impervious coverage, with the other reason being, as you mentioned, the pool and the patio.
Okay, thank you.
And just on that point, I just want the board to take notice of the thoughtfulness of the locations. And that was one of the reasons that it took us all summer to figure this out, because we did move these around and try to figure out what had the least impact on all of the people who were in that neighborhood.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just want to dovetail off of that. Why not put the driveway on Gates and turn the house so it's facing Gates and not Mitchell?
We did have that as one of the designs. The issue we had with that was then the rear yard, or again, the lot to behind us, Lot 40.
Yep.
Because again, we still need to have a driveway. Again, it wouldn't, it would still have to be 30 feet back, then the house, and then we'd have a rear yard setback, or
So now
side yard setback, but to the house
so
on
you're
Lot 40.
closer to 40 if you
Correct,
did that.
correct.
Another quick question regarding pools and patios. Is there any additional structures that would be required for the pools, like a pump house, filter room? Where would that go?
I don't know, I'm not a pool engineer, so I would have to say that, I imagine you need some sort of,
Typical applications in Long Hill for pools do have those kinds of structures for pool equipment, and I think for some of the
Yeah, the pool pump, a lot of times they have a small shed,
a small shed for the equipment and so forth, so it would add to the impervious coverage.
Okay.
or it would have to be on
In place
top
of.
in place of the patio area that they're showing today, because they could not exceed the limits that are shown today, so.
So it's not shown.
Does anybody else on the board have questions for the engineer with regard to engineering matters or water matters?
Impervious coverage, but if we come to that in a minute, we'll come to that in a minute.
Say again?
Impervious coverage when you're ready.
Well, go
You're
ahead,
there now, yeah.
go ahead.
There was a comment in my letter specifically addressing the impervious coverage requests related to both properties, as there is a variance for both lots. Of particular concern to me was that the lot coverage on Lot A is exactly 25%. So this means one hair over what's shown on this plans would necessitate, an additional variance by any future property or anything like that. So that, in my opinion, is cutting it very close.
That's comment 8, correct?
Yes, and that's kind of a two-part question, and this goes back to one of the board members' questions about the size of the patio, is the plan set did not include what we're traditionally used to seeing as a breakdown per lot of, building area, patio area, driveway. That way you can kind of look at those numbers and kind of see where any changes can be made and things like that. Without that breakdown, we're kind of just estimating, 1,000 here, 500 here, so it's a little bit tough to look at those lot coverage numbers without having that breakdown in order to, kind of evaluate where, suggestions could be made or improvements can be made. And again, back to that 25, that's very close. That's not a variance at this time, but it's right at the limit.
Yes, we did not want to have a variance for impervious coverage for Lot A. And, again, we sought to design the pool, the patio around the pool to meet at least the minimum requirements in terms of its separation from the building, area around the pool. We accounted for the steps, because they would be considered impervious coverage, the wall thicknesses to get to that number. Again, I would love to have a little more breathing room, but that's the way the number calculated itself out to.
To that point, because thank you for asking that question, could you actually go through, you mentioned the stairs and the wall.
Yep.
Can you define exactly on A what is impervious?
So,
Will come into calculation?
so again, unfortunately, I don't have the exact square footage of each, but just explain
give me
what's,
the
yes.
things, just so,
So the driveway, the walkways,
Mhm.
both the front and the back patio, pool, the wall thicknesses themselves, the stairs going down from the front of the house to the back of the house. I think that's all that was impervious. I did not count the seepage pit. I don't know if you guys.
No, that
Okay.
would not be, would not be counted.
so the wall, what point did you calculate the wall width from at?
I believe, I'm gonna get yelled at by but it was either, I think it was a 6 inches is what we used as the
6.
6, I don't remember if we used 6 inches or a foot width of the wall. I don't know for sure, but that's the width of the wall that we utilized.
The top of the wall, not the base or anywhere
Correct, I just used the width of the top of the wall.
top of the wall.
I don't know if you guys require the foundation of the wall, if it's
I'd be
thicker.
curious to know what the answer to that is.
Yeah, I don't think that's explicitly stated, because you bring up a very good point. Your footing is much wider than your cap on your wall. So, but the way it's written in the code,
It's only because you're so close.
Oh, yeah,
Every
absolutely.
inch matters now.
Yes.
pool surfaces, decks, patios.
Can I actually ask a question? So from what I understand, the house that you're proposing on Lot A hasn't changed from your May application in terms of square footage and size, right? You're
Correct.
still. So really, the only difference in impervious coverage is the pool.
The pool, we didn't have steps last time.
Okay.
Because we didn't have the same type of wall design previously. I don't know if the patio was larger or smaller.
It's smaller
but-
than the old. I've got them side by side.
So I'm just wondering if you were to sacrifice the pool, you would give yourself more breathing room.
Well, obviously, yes. If you sacrifice the pool and the patio becomes smaller, you would have more breathing room, yes.
Yeah, it doesn't include the wall. It's larger, this new application.
And the lot size also changed. Obviously, the denominator changed. Yeah,
No, right,
Yeah.
which you would think would help you there,
right.
right?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I want to understand, though, for clarification purposes, are these sacrifices being made? Are you amending the application?
No, the application stands.
Stands as is, okay. And the 20, on Lot A, the 25% coverage would be conforming, it's just at max.
Correct.
And that is, and you are still asking for that? You're asking for the at max with conforming coverage, correct?
We comply, correct.
Okay, and then one issue, if I may, raise is the issue of potential, assuming arguendo, there's an approval. I'm sorry, take out the arguendo. That's the attorney. Assuming there's an approval. The board may wish to consider a lot coverage disclosure, because in my experience with subsequent sales of property, when someone is at or close to maximum coverage, purchasers of the property don't necessarily know that, and the second they put 1 square foot of something somewhere, thinking it to be a reasonable residential amenity, and it may well be, they're over. So I just wanted to bring that point out.
Would that be a notation in the deed of subdivision?
It's up to the board if and when, but I mean, I've seen it done where it's a recorded document so that all subsequent purchasers are aware of that fact, or it
So you
could be
find
a
it in title
form.
search one way or
It could be a form for in the title search, correct, in the chain of title, or sometimes it's a form that is required to be given to at least the initial purchaser of the property, So it could take different formats or forms. I just wanted to make everybody aware of it.
I think we are slicing this too thin. It could be off by a square foot in the opposite direction just as easily. And so I would not, I wouldn't push this issue. If the engineer who signed off on the survey says 25%, I'm willing to accept that.
Mr. Seckler, while on this topic, your dry wells and seepage pits and all your stormwater management will be designed for the impervious coverages shown on these plans, with the understanding that some of this impervious coverage might not ultimately be built too, is that correct?
Correct. So we would design the seepage pit to support these sites with pools, and similar to what the board's council mentioned, we wanted to show the pools because that is an amenity that may be considered. Again, Lot A seems to fit under or at the 25% in that case, but the seepage pit will be designed for that. So even if the person who builds this does not want to put a pool in,
Yeah.
and they want a smaller patio, the seepage pit's then over-designed.
Absolutely. And then 10 years down the road, another buyer comes in, they want to put a pool in, they're not going to appear back before this board because they have an approved plan, potentially, if they
If they
stick to it.
build
As the per plan.
Yes.
They wouldn't have to.
I have another question on water, if you don't mind. Has on all of the soil on all of the property, has there been a perk test conducted?
That's what we're waiting on.
So that's in the
yeah,
report that you're waiting on?
Yes.
And then will there be soil in addition to the rocks and the seepage pits? Or is it just like rocks and stones that you were talking about?
In the seepage pit itself? Yeah, it's basically rocks and stones that the water then fills the voids between. And then, again, the anticipation, if we do have good infiltration, then the water basically infiltrates in that area.
So if this report comes back with negative implications, what would your plan be?
Right, so there was a couple items. One, your board engineer, I don't want to take credit, said there is a number of, I'd say, low-profile style techniques that could be utilized that basically use these chambers to hold water as opposed to infiltrate.
Okay.
So, again, as long as you have some level of separation between the, you're basically just having pipes that'll hold water and eventually work its way out. Again, there seemed to be one of the board members' suggestion about the potential of tying into the drainage system in the road. That obviously doesn't require any special infiltration rates. That could be an option if, all the items are exhausted.
Okay, so obviously we have a long way to go, but the applicant is aware that the application can be contingent on that report.
Correct. We understand that, if we don't satisfy your experts' review of those issues, then we don't have a project that can be built.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have anything else, Samantha?
Let me just check real quick. I think we've touched upon a lot of the comments. Under this new proposal, do you know if the site is a total net cut or net fill, or if it's about an even break?
I didn't run that analysis yet. I think it's going to be, my guess is going to be a cut. What? Oh, sorry. I'm not going to say anything. The chairman doesn't like when I guess.
So that's, that's certainly something we'd be looking for information on, especially as that impacts the neighboring property owners. If you're, bringing in a substantial amount of fill or cutting a substantial amount of fill, that's, could be a large trucking operation in and out.
I don't think it's going to be a substantial amount
In either direction.
in either direction.
Okay. Will there be any testimony on the architectural plans and how they've changed since you've last talked about them, or are they generally in compliance with the testimony from the first hearing?
It's generally in compliance. Previously, I believe we had like a larger building model and a smaller building model. They're basically both the larger building model now that the lot sizes have, across the board, increased.
Right.
But what was previously submitted was just a rendering, a
Right,
concept.
yeah,
It
a
was not
concept.
proposed
So,
approval.
but the testimony is that lots A and B are very similar in size, appearance, architecture, whereas last time, as you stated, we had A and B were similar. C was significantly smaller than the
Yes.
other two to fit on that corner lot.
Yes, and again, just to reiterate, both of these lots are larger than the largest lot previously. proposed.
To be honest, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're absolutely fine.
Just hold that up for a second, would you? I mean, it's pointless. Right? It's not how it's going to... I think people are more concerned, I'm more concerned about the rear view projection, not the front.
Right.
Right, so unless I see something like that, it's meaningless. So unless you're going to come back with better design concepts, it's really not telling the story. It tells 2 stories, doesn't tell you a 3rd story at the back. All right?
Mr. Steckler, does the changes in the plans that you've proposed tonight have any impacts on your testimony from the last hearing regarding the need or the no need for DEP permits as it relates to off-site wetlands, riparian zones, and the like?
My previous testimony would be consistent with tonight's.
And it is shown on these 2 plans that as far as utilities, water, sewer, gas, electric, everything is proposed to tie into Gates Avenue. So has it been reviewed if there's, the location and the practicality of connecting to the utilities in Gates Avenue? Based on elevations, it looks like these sewers would need grinder pumps, is that correct?
That is correct.
So just for the board and the public, that means the house sits lower than the road, so the sewage would have to be pumped up to the road, in simple terms. So I think those are all my questions for now. I'm sure I'll have more later, but I'll turn that over. Thank you.
Ms. Lahaney, you want to start walking through your report?
Sure. I mean, it's mostly planning related. Do you want to go there now?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
as long as it's the same,
can I ask one question of our engineer and their engineer, just one question for clarification?
you're late,
For
but
a
go ahead.
resolution. I didn't know you were going to, Ms. Laney, as quick as you did. Thank you. It's a very simple question. Are you stipulating, as a condition of approval, should there be an approval, to all the items as revised in the September 9, 2022 memo of Ms. Anello? Is there anything you're not stipulating to in that report?
Yes.
Yes, you're stipulating to it.
Yes.
So I could check them all off. Okay, that's all I had.
20-something.
25.
Yes.
25 comments.
Yes,
And some
correct.
of which are repeats from last time
Yes,
that
some
were
are already
already
addressed,
stipulated to in
and there
your
was some
cover
bolded
letter.
new
And
comments,
I've tried to
correct.
note that on here where.
Right, I was keeping track, but just for clarification, I wanted to make sure you were stipulating to all, or I wasn't incorrect, and you're stipulating to all, so
I'm going to review those as we do some of the planning testimony, and I'll confirm for you on the other side of the planning testimony.
thank you.
Okay, my letter dated September 9th, 2022. It outlines the 17 variances that you are requesting. Do you want to just walk through each of them? Because I've asked for planning testimony, and then I can, or I could go through the kinds of things that I would recommend that the board look at to evaluate the application in terms of planning.
Yeah, again, I think most or all the variances were variances that I previously testified to. Obviously, the extent of them may have changed. I think in almost all the cases, they've been improved versus what was previously testified to. And I'm thinking about or are the same. But items like lot size, obviously, again, we recognize that we are undersized. However, this is a street where the vast majority of the lots are undersized, and we would, put ourselves in one of the larger lots along Gates Avenue. As it relates to building height, again, I think you're looking at somewhat of a C1 variance case here because of the topography of the property, the extreme grade difference between the front and the back of the property. If we were to have, I would say, a no height variance on this type of lot, you actually would need to bring in significant fill to basically flatten the back half of the property in order to create a foundation level that would only allow for the 2 stories to be seen. So the house itself, the top of the house, would still be at the same elevation. It would just, we'd be filling in, instead of having a walkout basement, you basically would have a walkout first floor would be the difference, which would mean you'd have to then fight the natural grade and basically fill everything in. But the height where the roof is, the the second-story windows in the bedroom, that would still be the same. It would just be how the height is measured would change. That would be the compliant height for Lot A, or the house on Lot A. I think I explained on the front yard setbacks at the previous application or previous hearing. Again, this is a lot that the vast majority of the houses, including the houses next to us, have front yard setbacks similar to what our house is proposed. It does not appear that the 50-foot yard setback is kept with the nearby neighbors, and therefore we felt it was more consistent to keep it in line with the neighbors nearby. In addition, what that does is allows us to respect and comply with the rear yard setback, or the setback as it relates to Lot 40, which again, I think is from a C2 variance perspective, an improvement or a better planning alternative is to put the front of the house where the rest of the front of the houses are and give as much room in the rear of our house so we don't butt up against or even go near the rear yard setback line or side yard for the corner lot as it relates to us in Lot 40. So I think in terms of the front yard setbacks, I think that's the C2 variance justification. I'll go through the positive criteria as well, but I just want to lay out, some of the reasons or purposes for these various variances that we're seeking. Lot coverage, again, we discussed that we are seeking the variance as it relates to Lot B. I think some of it, as one of the board members mentioned, was the pool patio, which again, some of it is if we didn't include it, then we could be having to put the stipulation in the deed that someone would have to come back for that similar type of application. However, a lot of it is also because of the 50-foot front yard setback on Mitchell Road. So we have is a driveway that, is greater than, 65 feet from the front, from the road, greater than 50 feet, obviously, from the property line, in order to align correctly with the house. We looked at actually turning the garage and have it just the garage face gates, but then we wouldn't have a long enough driveway to have cars wait in the driveway in our property. They basically would be over the property line if they were not parked in the garage. The alternative would be to then move the whole house closer to Lot 40, which again, we're looking at as a negative effect of trying to comply with the lot coverage variance. So again, we were looking at kind of balancing those aspects. We do believe, and again, we feel confident in working with your board's engineer that we'd be able to mitigate the increased impervious coverage through the seepage pit design. We're not designing the seepage pits to meet the 25% standard. We're meeting it to meet the amount of impervious coverage we have proposed on the site. So again, as all the additional impervious coverage we have, that has to be met within the seepage pit itself, or whatever alternative design is necessary. We also have the height variances, the front yard, max square floor area ratio. Again, this is,
You don't have a variance.
sorry,
You don't have an
we do not have
FAR
variance with those,
You'd be
okay.
in front of the wrong board.
That's right, good point. We'd have to close up shop here. The heights of the walls or the fence on the walls, again, I tried to give the testimony, or attempted to give the testimony earlier. Again, this is to, especially on the west side of the site, to help decrease the amount of disturbance next to us in a property to our west and maintain mature trees that are located along that property line. So we, again, looking at a C2 perspective, think it's an advantage to provide the wall. Again, that wall is not sitting, 6 feet high right up on the property line where it meets its maximum height, is basically where it meets the house itself. So again, it's, while on paper, those heights obviously clearly are variances, they slope or they grade up in a way that it is more on intervals, so it's not as extreme. And again, I think that it does provide a way to help maintain some of the existing vegetation and growth on the site itself. So again, I think from a C2 perspective, I do think we have a better designed plan versus what the alternative would be here. And then also a C1, because we're dealing with the grades on the site, is why we have to design these walls in the first place. If this was a flat site, trust me, we wouldn't be designing any walls.
Okay, so then the next group of variances, and it's almost half your variances relate to critical area.
Yes.
Right, 8 variances. So can you just talk about that? Like what the critical areas are and where your proposed buildings are in relation to those critical areas?
Yeah, so the critical areas are on C4 of our plan set, and I have a colored version. I don't know if yours is printed in color. It shows in red the critical areas. The vast majority of the critical areas are in the front of the house on Lot A. That's the majority. Again, some of it is where the house itself is, but the vast majority would be in the front yard of Lot A.
And can you just identify for the public and the board what critical areas we're talking about?
Critical areas are slopes that are 15% or greater.
But there are no wetlands.
There's no wetlands, there's no environmentally sensitive areas. It appears to be man-made, potentially when the house that's currently on that site or near that site was developed. It's possible that, that was where, that's how the property was graded at that point.
And there are no floodplains.
There's no floodplains.
So the only critical areas are the steep slope.
Yes, it's only steep slopes, and again, does not appear to be environmentally sensitive steep slopes in the sense that, the disturbance of them, I don't believe will cause, any type of erosion. I don't believe there's any, animal life or anything like that that utilizes the steep slopes. Again, it was on a residential property, likely was related to the creation of the foundation or the flat area when they built the house that was on the property previously. And also, again, just the natural grade of the property. It does have, again, 15, 16 feet, depending on where you sit, great difference between the front and the back. So there is a natural grade to the property. It just appears that a lot of it is centered in that one location near the front of Lot A.
Okay, so then I just want to go, I'm sure you've seen my letter. Most of the subdivision variances you're requesting, you've kind of characterized as C2, which I would agree with, which are, flexible C2. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. So some of the questions that I raised is, and certainly the board is going to have to evaluate this in considering this application is, is it, I don't want to lead your question, but do the characteristics of the land present, in your opinion, present an opportunity? For example, why is the Gates Avenue currently, seemingly have a missing tooth, so to speak, like in the streetscape, because there's only one house here rather than 2?
Yes, there's obviously the way that the houses or the lots are created here. Again, they seem to have, widths that are similar to, 150 feet of frontage, 120 feet, 160 feet of frontage. As you kind of go down, it's around that measurement. You see a house, you see a house, you see a house. And currently, again, there's one house here, but there are 2 lots, that were created. One is really, really tiny, and one is very large compared to the rest of the neighborhood. We're basically saying, and you saw on that lot coverage piece, if you just kind of split them up a little bit more, these 2 lots down the middle, you combine them, split them down the middle, this is what you get. And that's kind of where we came with. We looked at as much as lot size, the lot width, because that's what people experience as they drive down the street. And so the corner lot, we used 159 feet of frontage. Again, a little bit longer because the lot is not as deep, so we felt like it was more beneficial to give them a little bit more. And then lot A is 150 feet. Again, seemed to be generally, what you see along this corridor, even though the minimum is 100-foot lot width, it seems like the lots tend to be, again, 100, 120 feet in width. So as you go down the street, what exists on this property today does not seem to fit. Again, maybe it's the maintenance, maybe it's the grading of the site previously, the way the house laid out, the old garage. That current house and the current lots don't align with the rest of the neighborhood as they do with this proposed plan.
So I guess, would you be saying that you're creating 2 lots that are more in character with the neighborhood?
Correct, yes.
And, can you identify some of the impacts that you're going to have on your neighbors? I mean, I think we have tonight, but maybe talk about that a little bit in your testimony.
Yeah, so obviously, stormwater is one of the items. That said, as I think one of the board members mentioned, today, no development on the site, water goes to the rear neighbor. We're looking to mitigate, take that 4 inches of storm, regardless of how we how we designed it, 3 seepage pits, 2 seepage pits, infiltration, storage, that's going to be an improvement over the neighbor's property, or what the neighbor experiences today. The height, again, was one of the aspects that was discussed, again, somewhat related to the grade of the property. But what we're proposed to do is, again, the tree lines at the property line, the bush lines at the series of walls, so that anyone behind the site looking at this, they're going to see the vegetation and not basically just a continuous wall of building. We've respected the rear yard setback. Again, this property is allowed to have a 25-foot rear yard setback. Our closest point to the rear yard is 60.2 feet, so we're over double the amount of rear yard for Lot A, I'm talking about, which is the one that has the height variance aspect. So again, it is taller, although from the street it'll look the same, it is taller, but we've moved it twice the distance from the rear yard to help mitigate that issue. So again, I think that is an item that we've, when you're looking at designing and affecting neighbors, I think we've mitigated that concern as it relates to height. Obviously, separating at that distance, you don't have an issue with shadowings or privacy and things like that, because you've moved it significantly further from the rear yard line.
Okay, and so could you, we talked about sort of the missing tooth along gates. What, to Mr. Hand's point, what about the experience, the views from the properties that are to the south?
Right, so again, that was the fact that we added, tree lines along both rear property lines, and I'm gonna say rear, even though the corner lot, it's considered a side by zoning.
Southern lot line.
Southern lot line is probably the correct way to say it. So southern lot line, we've added the trees. Again, if there's a request to, and again, this was one of those stormwater mitigation techniques, if there's a request to mound those trees up a little bit, so even if they're planted at 5 feet, they could be sitting at 7 feet if we, kind of mound them up about another 2 feet and do some sort of swale on our side of the wall. We do have the fences and the various kind of retaining walls to help break up the height as it relates to the rear. We're respecting the southern lot line setbacks, so we are not seeking a variance as it relates to that neighbor. We're not seeking a variance as it relates to any property line that we adjoin with another property as it relates to the setbacks. The setback variances we're seeking are closer to gates, which is, again, consistent with the rest of the neighborhood when you're driving up and down the street there.
One other question, and you alluded to this earlier but I raised it in my letter, and it had to, when I was looking at the landscaping plan for Lot A, it didn't seem like the pool area was especially well buffered from the properties to the west. But you talked about there actually being additional landscaping, but I didn't see it on the plan. I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Well, I think what I was stating is that the property to the west, there is a series of trees that exist actually more near the front of the house is what I was referring to. So it was maintaining that vegetation, and we've also planted plants near the wall so that when you're looking at the property from the west to the east, instead of seeing a wall and a fall protection, you would basically see a row of shrubs. So you wouldn't actually see the fall protection in that aspect. We could do some plantings closer to I'd say the patio around the pool itself, if that's a request, that we have no problem including that. We did include, I believe, some decorative grasses and things like that on the patio around the pool. But again, we definitely could add some on I'd say the low side of the patio, if that's a request.
Okay, those are my only questions right now, Mr. Chair.
Just one quick thing. You had that picture, that's the satellite picture. No, not the city pictures.
Do you want me to get it, Mr.?
Yes, please. Can we just have a look at, I want to see the property on the north side of Gates.
Yep.
My recollection is it's single property.
Reference the exhibit, is that A?
I never wrote it because I never.
It's A4. And I'm writing that down now.
Just want to check the property lines of the north. See, there are 2 properties then. These 2, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And again, the vast majority, I was alluding to the front yard setback. If you look to the west, which you'll see most of Gates, you'll see that most of these houses have setbacks that are around 20 feet or so.
That's fine, it's the north side, I wanted to double check.
The one immediately across, from Lot A. That is one of the three properties that meets the lot size and obviously meets the lot setback. I don't know if they meet a rear yard setback, but that is obviously not consistent with the remainder of the lots that you see.
Okay, thank you for showing me that.
Mr. Chairman, maybe he can show that again to the members of the public,
Just
so.
putting the boards over there. Thank
That's
you.
lot 4 you're talking about across the street from Gates, right?
Yeah.
I think that's lot 4, where the house is set all the way back.
Yes, lot 4.
Thank you.
Mr. Steckler, with the chair's permission, maybe you could turn it so the members of the public could see it better, and if they want to take a look at it.
Anybody else have any planning, anybody on the board have any other planning questions? Okay, then I'm going to ask one. In Ms. Lahaney's report, she says, "The board must be satisfied that the subdivision would not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan. The board must evaluate whether the proposed subdivision would present a better zoning alternative at this location." For all the words that I've heard in answer to the questions, I have not heard a 100-word, tight, concise discussion about whether or not this subdivision would not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan. And I'd like to hear those 100 words now.
Sure. Currently, the subject property consists of two lots. One of the lots is 7,362 square feet, where the other one is 26,346 square feet. The way that the lots are currently designed, you would have one lot that would be extremely undersized if developed, and therefore, the design plan that we have, which basically brings two lots that fit better within the community, is a better zone plan than developing the lots as they exist today.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm
Yeah,
ready
sorry,
to,
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Tom.
You're asking for a variance on height, and that's 3 stories on Lot A. And is that because the lowest point is in the back of the house because it's a walkout?
Correct,
But
yes.
From the curb, it still appears to be a 2-story building.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
okay, we're now ready to open the meeting to the public for questions of the witness. This is questions only, please. And if your question has already been asked and answered in the past hour of discussion, please don't ask it again.
And Mr. Chairman, each individual a member of the public will give their name and address first and then ask their questions, correct?
I'm also going to remind you that this is not the time for comments. If you do not agree with anything you have heard, you have to save that for the comments after the questions. This is questions only about the testimony that was given. You can't ask questions about testimony that was not given. You cannot ask questions about your opinion of how things could have been done differently.
Thank you. My name is Linda Gavin. I live at 28 Gates across the street. My question goes back to the same question that I asked at the last meeting. It was about sewer hookups. At that point, it was testified that there is currently one sewer hookup, and there was going to be a check to see if a second sewer hookup was available for the other house, and if not, if the plan was to put a septic system in. We heard the township engineer testify about sewage pits, seepage pits, not being close to septic tanks, and I was wondering if we had any more information on that.
So we would not be doing septic regardless, so if there is not capacity for the second house, we would wait until there'd be capacity to construct the second house. But obviously, we would utilize the credits of the existing house that's out there to utilize for that sewer. We did, Nancy at the township administrator has helped us try to get answers from NJW. We have not gotten anything specifically in writing, whether the fact that we were 2 lots and keeping 2 lots, if that would entitle us to that second hookup.
So you don't really have any more information?
All I can tell you is, again, we are not putting in septic, and we would wait to build the second house until capacity is available, if it's not available today.
So which house would you build first?
That's up to the developer, man.
So can you also explain to me, because you've said a couple of times, well, whoever builds this, so you are the engineering company, and then the owner of the property would find a construction company? How does this work?
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I believe that's irrelevant in the manner of which the construction would occur.
Yeah, I think this is beyond the scope of the testimony.
Okay.
What happens after the subdivision is approved is out of the hands of the planning board.
Okay, thanks very much.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a clarifying question so that whatever happens, the resolution is accurate? Is the applicant stipulating to no septic?
Yes.
And is the applicant stipulating to not constructing a second home, assuming there's an approval, until there's sufficient capacity?
Well,
I think that one's a little more nuanced.
I would imagine so. I want to be clear in any resolution, whether it's to grant or deny, whatever it is, I want to be clear.
right, I guess I don't want to stipulate they can't construct. They can, I assume, occupy if the capacity and the hookup is not available.
Let me even go one further than that, Mr. Werner. It would be, there should be no stipulation in it. Obviously, the construction could not occur unless the hookups were allowed or some alternative non-septic was determined to be available to the property owner.
Now, I hope the board fully understands what's being proposed, and so.
Yeah, I have to agree with Mr. Forrest that he can't get construction permits if he can't get sewer hookup, and that's all out of our hands.
Thank you for the clarification.
Hi, I'm Jessica Alon. I live at 40 Mitchell Road. My house is the house below the bottom of, at the bottom of the hill from the
Spell your
subject
last
property.
name, please.
Alon is A-L-A-A-N.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on the sewer question. So if there is one sewer line, is there a construction sequence plan that we will be able to see in order to know, will all of the trees be coming down at once? If all of the trees come down, what will we be doing to stop the water, because we're getting rid of all this, natural vegetation? So I was curious what the construction sequence plan will look like if there is only one sewer line.
Yeah, again, Mr. Chairman, I would just think that it's irrelevant in terms of the construction plan. I do know, however, that there's some detail with regards to that in the engineer's report in terms of staging and such other things, and we would certainly comply reasonably with the town officials in that regard.
Yeah, I have to agree that it will happen. And it will happen at the pace that the developer is willing to pay to have it happen.
Okay,
And,
so I'll be protected from water even if this construction process takes 3 years.
Well, I don't think he's gonna be, I'm guessing, but I don't imagine he's gonna do too much prep work until he's ready to actually build. That would be my guess. That's only a guess.
I think too, it's worth noting that any application here and any construction permits, they would have to obtain a soil erosion and sediment control permit from Morris County, and that stipulates silt fencing, secondary runoff measures, all those type measures that are meant to protect you during construction before the site is fully stabilized. So in addition to any compliance with township requirements, there is the soil erosion and sediment control standards that they would have to comply with, and if they did not comply with that, you could call up Morris County, have their inspector come out and issue them a violation and/or a stop work order. And I've seen that enforced many times.
Okay, thank you. We'll do that.
If I can clarify further, that's referenced in Ms. Anello's September 9th, 2022 letter at paragraph 5, sections A through E. And at this point, I can also answer Mr. Werner's question of previously, that the applicant would comply with all 25 paragraphs of that letter.
Thank you.
So, and just a little clarification also with the seepage pits, it sounds like maybe a little bit of maintenance would need to be done by the homeowner. So if the homeowner neglects the seepage pits, will that negatively affect the water on my property?
Chairman, respectfully, I don't think that's a question for this applicant or for this witness.
What? Mr. Chairman, I think it's a fair question for Mr. Seckler if he could answer it.
I would say it's no different than if your neighbor has gutters that fill up with sediment and then all of a sudden it changes the flow of water and goes onto your property. That this obviously, seepage pits are again, relatively low maintenance item. Again, as with anything, they would notice if there's water that isn't getting into it through backups on their own property. Again, I don't know any stipulations on maintenance for single-family houses for units like this. But again, I believe that this is a low-maintenance unit, doesn't require a lot of maintenance, less maintenance than, again, your standard gutters that you get cleaned, every year.
But now,
to
do
make sure-
these hold more than a standard gutter in terms of water?
Well, it holds,
So
the water that used to be in the gutter ends up in the
But it's
seepage
would there
pit.
be a greater impact on an unmaintained seepage pit than an unmaintained gutter?
I don't know if there's I don't know if I can answer a question like that.
I'm sorry, I'd like to interject there. I'd like to ask that question a little bit differently.
Okay.
If the property owner knows there's a seepage pit or doesn't know that there's a seepage pit, are they allowed to build on top of it?
I don't believe they could because they would have to seek some sort of permit or approval either from this board or another.
So they would be aware that there's a seepage pit on it, and they would be aware of, that they're not allowed to do anything on top of it. They can't use it as a compost, they can't put a shed on top of it, they can't do anything to that space. That has to stay just grass or something along those lines.
Well, they're located in the setback, so any item that would then require, obviously, approval, this board, their professionals would obviously raise the red flag. Obviously, it's not a conservation easement, you could replace it with something else if you want to move it, but as it exists,
Correct, you would have to.
as
move it.
designed, it would have to be, you couldn't build on top of it.
Okay.
Would they legally have to move it? So like they can move it, but would they have to replace it? So you take out a seepage pit, does it have to be replaced?
I believe that would be a site plan condition, so if it moves, it'd
They'd have
be
to
violate
apply.
the plan.
They'd have to comply with the plan if it was approved by the
Okay.
board tonight or another night. It would have to comply. So if they were then going to amend that plan, they would need to seek permission to amend that plan. Also, I want to, Mr. Seckler, dry wells, these will be standard dry wells, so would they be equipped with inspection ports at grade?
Yes.
So kind of similar to what you may see in your yard as like a sewer cleanout, small PVC pipe. That's kind of what you see on the top of these. Those can be taken off. You can insert devices down it to inspect the inside of it. Also, at the house, will there be backflow preventers with splash box?
Yes.
And can you explain kind of how those work?
Yeah, again, the point is that you don't want the system, if there is a clog or a backup, to basically back all the way up. So basically, you have an area that is easily seen. If the backup occurs, you usually could see it as I see it in my house, it has a pipe with a kind of a grate in front of it, so you would see water coming out that location if there was a backup further down the line.
Okay, so just one more seepage pit question. So you had said that if it becomes clogged, they would see the water and know there's a problem. Would their house be affected by an overflowing seepage pit, or would I be the only home affected? So it might not be of any interest of them to clean it.
I think that depending on where some of those backflow preventers are located, it can be causing pooling in an area where they would then be affected
So
near the
can we put the
foundation.
backflow poolers so it affects them as well?
They're typically at the foundation location. So your gutter comes down to grade, and then it's going to go underground, typically right at that point. So if there is a surcharge, it tends to backflow right at the foundation of the house. And it is fairly evident when that happens.
Okay.
It will look a little bit alarming to them when water's coming the wrong direction.
And again, at the foundation, which is, probably the location
The
where they
low
wouldn't want,
foundation.
Right.
Yeah,
they wouldn't
exactly,
want the
exactly
water
where
to
you
be.
don't want water to come.
You had stated, Mr. Seckler, that this is an improvement in terms of, the water remediation, that this is an improvement. I'm just having a hard time understanding how it's an improvement when there's greater lot coverage, an increase in impervious surface, and a decrease in natural vegetation.
Yeah, because of the way that you're holding back that 4-inch storm. So right now, a 4-inch storm comes and it just rolls, especially at intensity, will just kind of roll down the hill towards your property.
Even with all that vegetation that's natural, that's been there for 100 years, that's soaking it up?
It's still, again, if it rained today after raining last night and the water in the ground is oversaturated, that water's basically just coming towards you. And again, some of it's related to velocity, some of it's related to the saturation, the infiltration rates that you may get in this area. But again, it's because you're able to hold some of that water basically underground. What you're doing is you're exchanging the above-ground impervious coverage for an underground chamber that's
So
going to hold back
that
the
will
water.
hold just as much as what the current surface is holding?
That's how we design the size of it, is to make sure that we hold a 4-inch storm that would have been, let's say, naturally going through the ground, but now is hitting impervious.
Have you been able to come out to my property in a rainstorm to see exactly what goes on?
I have not been to your property in a rainstorm.
How many trees are there currently on the property?
On the property, or, let's do on the property.
On both lots, total?
I'd say about 52. There's also a number of trees that are between the property line and the street, basically within the right-of-way.
So how many will be coming down?
I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23. About 30 of them,
So more than 50%?
yes.
Okay. How tall, this is a little bit somewhat related, how tall are the trees that you're putting on the property line?
That we're putting on the property line? the
Yeah.
Proposed trees?
I was like the evergreens or arborvitae.
Yeah, so the arborvitaes and the spruces are planted at 5 to 6 feet, and then they grow basically usually about 2 feet a year, as they get
So
larger.
they will not be covering the height of a 38-foot house from my view for, I don't know, 15, 20 years?
Well, if you're on the ground, the trees would cut off your angle, depending on where you're looking at it from.
But
So-
if I'm on my patio and the house is way up there on a hill, the tree's actually going to look pretty small, and I'm going to probably still be looking up at a 38-foot house,
Well,
correct?
again, the trees would cut off some angle depending on where you're at. Again, in 3 years, those trees would be 10 feet high, and again, I don't know,
So we still have 28 feet to go.
Then you have a wall with vegetation around it, and then you have vegetation along the foundation of the wall itself. So you're not going to see the entire 38 feet of height from your property because of the angles of the trees and the way the walls and the shrubs around the walls are planted.
That's not the way I see it from my current property, but thank you.
I'm sorry.
Sorry,
That is not a question. If you can't confine yourself to questions, then please let someone else take the
Okay,
mic.
I have asked many questions so far, and I have a few others. Can you just, has there been a house height comparison that you've been able to do of the neighborhood?
I have not done a house height comparison in the neighborhood, and again, just to reiterate.
Question was asked at the May hearing and answered very well at the May hearing.
Okay.
And you can get
Okay,
the answer by watching the video.
Is there any reason why we need such a steep pitch roof and we can't make the roof pitch a 4 and 12 with a hip roof to at least minimize the height of the house?
Yeah, I'm not an architect, so I can't speak to the way the roof would be designed. Again, we've designed the house to be 38 feet measured from the lowest point, which is from the rear of the house, or the rear property, or rear foundation. In terms of the roof, I would have to ask an architect to decide what the impact is of a hip roof design versus the roof that's been proposed.
And is there another meeting then, once those plans happen? Or
Well,
no?
we're seeking a variance for 38 feet. Obviously, anything that could be constructed on less than that, I don't believe requires any additional approval by the board if this is approved.
Okay.
I would have to defer to council.
That's correct.
That's correct.
And then one last question. So the house facing Mitchell, is there any reason why it can't be flipped so that the garage is on my side, which is a lower side, so I don't have, again, a 38-foot side of a house 14 feet from my house?
That's a speculative question based on a plan that the engineer did not propose or study. And I don't think he has to answer that. There's a lot of different ways of flipping the house and building it underground, for example, and he doesn't have to explain his reasons for not taking those choices. We're here to approve the plan that he submitted.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Jones, for coming out onto our property. If anyone else would like to ever swing by and take a walk on a rainy day, feel free to do so.
My pleasure, thank you.
My name's William Zerlo. I live at 8 Doherty Avenue, Gillette, New Jersey.
Can you spell your last name, please, Mr. Zerlo?
Zurawlow. My question to you is on these pits you're putting in the ground. They're going to be lowered than the ground. When they fill up with water, where does that water go?
It normally then runs over ground to where it would be going in the natural condition today.
Like it's the lowest level, right? Water seeks the slope. If you're
Yes,
up-
yes.
If you put a sewer pit here and her property's lower than here, water's going to seep down into her.
As it does today, yes. But what we mentioned was that we would be willing to mound up the tree line along the property line to potentially create an additional swale. And there was also a suggestion of potentially looking into connecting into the stormwater system within the roadway if that's a feasible opportunity
I think
here.
that's a feasible thing for you. That was, one other question. I just wanted to show you a picture of what it looks like now from my backyard, and I'm going to be...
If I may, sir, Mr. Chairman, we can have, should the board so desire, this marked as an exhibit. And certainly, it's with the discretion of the board, members of the public can ask questions referencing exhibits, if that's acceptable to you.
You know, Ed, that sounds like an alternative set of comment as opposed to a question related to this testimony.
Okay,
I'd like you to hold that.
one other question I'd like to ask you. You're putting a driveway going on Mitchell. The water's going to run down Mitchell, down Gates to Mitchell. Gates has a storm sewer right there. Mitchell don't. And that water runs on the street, believe me, I've seen it. When the weather's bad, ice is up, the school bus has trouble going up it, you got kids walking up it, something's got to be done with that before these houses should be allowed. And I would like to know the water plan that they're showing before you guys approve this. Because they're saying they're going to do this, they're going to do that. I want to see the plan. And I think we all, as taxpayers, have the right. That's what I got to say.
I have a quick question regarding the seepage pit. When it's built, does that then go on a new survey, that location?
So typically, I believe an as-built survey is provided when the construction is complete. That usually includes items like, could include building height. That way you ensure that the building elevation was consistent with the zone plan. But yes, that would be one of the items that would be included in that.
Okay, because that's not been my experience.
Okay.
My next-door neighbor's house was built 3 years ago. He has no idea where the seepage pits are.
It should always, at a minimum, identify where the inspection ports are. So those inspection ports give you a very good idea of where the dry wells are.
Buried in the lawn, he has no idea where it is, but the gutters and the leaders go into it.
As-built survey
But he has
with
no
the dry
idea
well
where
and
it
the
is.
inspection ports should
And I just
always
wondered
be
if-
identified at a
Is
minimum.
that normal, or did his
That is
builder
normal.
take a shortcut?
we'll talk about that.
Mr. Chairman, I think that might not be relevant to the
Right,
subject. of
exactly.
application.
Well, it is relevant to the point where if there was just testimony given about the fact that he couldn't build anything on that, but if he doesn't know where it is,
We would stipulate that we would file an as-built survey
expressed
that would locate
is will it be done properly, I think.
Correct.
okay, thank you.
Yeah,
just
and you're
a matter of
stipulating.
record, that will then show on future plans where those seepage pits are, right? So
Yes.
that'll be a living
It'll
record.
be on
then.
record in the town
Right.
building department.
Okay, and I have a follow-up question with regards to the green giants and arborvitaes. Those are the ones that are gonna be planted along the south side, back side, or side against Lot 40, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I know those are very aggressive growing trees, and I just did a quick Google, and it's 3 to 5 feet growth, so they are quick growers.
Until the deer eat them.
Until the deer eat them, right, but they'll only get up the first 5 feet, so now you're looking underneath. But it should be known as a record that they are very aggressively grown trees, and we've looked at that at other applications that have been brought before this board.
Yeah, the spruce is about a 2-foot year, and the green giants, again, they're a preferred plant to use for property line privacy
Yep.
for that reason, that
That's
they
right.
grow quick and they grow wide and
That's right.
and they go.
Okay, thank you.
David Coletta, Coletta, 313 Long Hill Road, Gillette, New Jersey. So I just
Excuse me,
want to,
sir, before you start, this is a comment I've made many times at board meetings, but when the American flag is displayed in the room, no one should be wearing a hat.
Sure.
It's a sign of, thank you.
Yeah,
Nothing personal, but
no,
thank you.
got the American flag on the hat. So,
That's okay, so do I. I don't wear it now in the room.
so I wanted to just clarify the soil study that we don't have yet. When any decisions tonight will have stipulations based off of how that comes back? Because if the findings are negative, will we be back here then for additional discussions? Because the negative findings could, again, there's a lot of weight being placed on these seepage pits that will negatively impact it. So I just want to ensure I understand what those steps are after the findings from that study.
I think you should defer to the board engineer on that one.
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, I think it might be appropriate for Mr. Seckler to respond to the question based on stipulations provided, and to the extent necessary, board professionals can weigh in as well. But I defer to the chair.
Yeah, I'm willing to have a brief answer, basically, tell it like it is.
Yeah, if we get a poor result, we would then work with your board, even if we get a great result, working with your board engineer to ensure the design is appropriate. We would then, if we get a poor result, we would look at the alternatives that were mentioned, again, some sort of a shallow kind of detention system connecting to the a line potentially Mitchell Road. If we exhaust all potential options and mitigation through an engineering mechanism is not feasible or would require a variance or a change to this plan, like in terms of needing a new setback, then we would have to come before the board. At least that's my understanding. We'd have to come before the board for approval.
No, I agree with Mr. Seckler. You know, if they can work with the confines of what they've shown on these plans, then it's, you know, acceptable regardless of if it's good results, bad results, somewhere in the middle. If they have to change something, then they might have to ultimately appear back before this board. So, and they have, Mr. Seckler, your client understand that is a potential that could happen.
Yes.
And the stipulation is, among other things, subject to the review and approval of our board engineer or township engineer, or both.
Right.
Within his, her, or their reasonable discretion, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
And so when that study comes in, will that be made public? Will people be notified to review it?
It will be reviewed by the professionals, as counsel just described. Quite frankly, if you ain't an engineer, we're not going to listen to your opinion about reviewing that anyway. So, yes, it will be here. It will be a matter of record. You can get it through the normal open public records if you really want to read it, but don't expect to comment on it unless you're competent to to review it.
And that's, I would assume then your findings, maybe more in layman's terms, would be available as well?
Yes, as part of the review, when any application is approved, we do a resolution compliance review where we go through all the conditions of the resolutions and state whether or not the conditions are or are not satisfied. So that would, again, be a matter of public record that you could always look for, and there would be comments in there that you can look to
Okay.
read.
All right, thank you.
Next.
Good evening, all. My name is Paul White, last name spelling, W-H-I-T-E, common spelling.
Would you please pick up the microphone and hold it closer? You're too tall for that mic stand.
Very good. Is this better?
Much better.
The mic stand might be too short for you, but either way.
That's okay. We'll make it work.
Your address is, Mr. White?
Name is Paul White. My address is 25 Darty Avenue.
Thank you.
Gillette, New Jersey, of course. That's it. My question is going to be focused pretty, well, a few things, but I'd like to ask Mr. Sackler about the retaining walls that are going to go up. These will be lock and blocks, or will they be poured concrete?
We have not designed them. What we did agree to is that they would be decorative in nature. So in other words, they're not going to look like your, New Jersey highway retaining walls. Some of the smaller ones would likely be like a fieldstone wall, like a 3-foot, might be the fieldstone style wall. The remainder of the walls, again, we're, somewhat deferring to the builder to provide details. We do have a block wall design that's included within our plan. That's, the intended wall for.
Concrete block wall and masonry?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you, I'm going to say, and it would be what type of gravel? 3/4 clean stone? What would be in front of that wall?
Yeah, we have a
Drainage.
3/4 rocker stone behind the wall. We include a perforated PVC pipe to ensure that we'd have proper drainage. Again, we're going to need a connection from one side of the wall to the other on Lot A in order to get the water that's on the higher level to the seepage pit on the other side.
Okay, so at this point, the water flowing would not flow as it does now, correctly? Correct?
In other words, correct. In building on this lot, we are changing the grade of the property. However, the low points of the site will remain the low points of the site.
Right, and this will be changed. The retaining walls are going to be up to 11 feet high, 12 feet high, and as you stated, the water flows from obviously high to low, so this water will actually flow faster through the 3/4 clean stone out the perforated pipe. It would actually flow faster towards, I guess, the seepage pits.
The intention is to have it reach the seepage pits. Again, the wall itself is not the 11 feet high. That includes the fence on top, just to clarify. The maximum wall height is about a little under 8 feet. Again, we're saying 8 feet, just to allow ourselves some cushion there. But again, yes, the design of the seepage pit will be required to include the velocity of the runoff in its design.
Because this is basically going to have Lot 40, again, I'll make it a question, I'm sorry. As of now, Lot 40 and the houses south of that, as of now, they're not at the bottom of a gully or a hill. Now they're going to be at the bottom of a hill, is that correct, basically?
Well, it's the low point of the property, so again, it's still, our low point is at the property line, currently is at the property line that adjoins Lot 40.
Right. So with the water flowing, it's pretty much changed the flow of the water. As you said, it's not going to be the same. If there was just one house on this lot, there would be more raw land, correct?
That's not a part of the testimony that the engineer has given on this application. There's a two-house application, a subdivision application, and that's what his testimony has concerned.
Okay, very good. This has to do with the water also. No one's talked about the water flowing out. Actually, he did. The water flowing out onto Mitchell and across the way where there's a pond, there's actually, the township had actually engineered to protect the street. They actually, prior to this, there was actually a gutter there with 3/4 inch clean stone for years, and it pretty much washed away over time. It started to take away the roadway. Now they have, it's not a trench or gully that you say. I'm trying to get to it so you understand what I'm saying, because it has to do with the water flow. Just bear with me. They actually used to have a trench the entire length of the street, and I don't know what they did. Now they have a manhole cover there. It's the size of a pizza with some holes in it where the water pretty much flows over it, and it's actually digging up the grass there now when there's a high flood. With these retaining walls that is going to be designed on these properties, the water coming through the 3/4 inch clean stone, out the perforated pipe going towards the seepage pit, there's going to be a ton more water coming through there at a higher flow, and it's probably going to go out.
Stop.
Go ahead.
We don't know that there's going to be more water flow. That's your speculation. If you'd like to make a comment on that later, or if you'd like to bring in an expert to talk about that later, fine. But at this point, you cannot assert that there's going to be more water flow because there's no testimony along those lines. Now, please, stick with questions of the
Okay.
testimony you heard.
I'm trying to do my best here. It's hard to do the question. Well, we came across that the water will flow differently from what the original layout is, because obviously it'll be changed. Is there a guarantee that the property next door will not get flooded?
Of course, that's well beyond the scope of any testimony or any question that this board is capable of answering. There is no guarantee. The only requirement that we have is that there be no more water flow than there is today.
And again, with the change in the plans, Mr. Sackler testified that it will be changed. The water flow, the water distributing, it won't be rural land anymore. This water, will it be a guarantee to the neighbors that they won't have water problems? This is a question to Mr. Sackler. Is this a guarantee they won't have water problems, yes or no?
Of course, there is no
It's a question.
guarantee. The question's out of line.
So you're answering for Mr. Sackler?
No, I'm telling you that your question is out of line, and we're running out of time, and if you'd like to give up the microphone to somebody else, I would appreciate that.
I'm not done with my question yet.
Mr. Chairman, we are out of time for 9:55.
I had one more question.
All right, one more question, and keep it brief, please.
It has to do with the height. Mr. Sackler, have you considered if there was a fire, being that this is a 38-foot high house, are fire trucks in town, things like that, it'd be hard for the firemen, it'd be a danger to them. Has anybody considered this? It's higher than your average property. It's definitely higher than any other house in that neighborhood. Has this been considered?
I'm not an architect, but again, the height of this house as it relates to the street is no different than any other kind of two-story house. The 38 feet is because it's being measured from the back of a walkout basement. So from the street, it is the same height. If we filled the entire backyard to the basement level, it would be no different to get to the top of the house from the street.
Okay,
And of
so,
course, the applicant will comply with the local fire code and building code.
right. But if there's a fire in the rear of the building, it is 30 feet high, they'd have to fight that fire at 38 feet, which is high.
That's a comment, it's not a
Okay.
question.
Okay, very good. All right, I thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I'll pass the mic.
Now,
Oh.
at this point, I have announced that we are going to stop the hearing. How many more people out there have questions for the engineer? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. We're going to have to continue the hearing for questions, and then following that, for public comments. And so I'll ask council, when would you like to come back? And I'll give you two choices. You can have an hour, maybe an hour and a half on October 11th, or you can have the entire meeting on October 25th.
Mr. Chair, while they're looking at their diaries, I do have a question with regards to the wall and construction of the wall. On C7, on the architectural plans that have been provided, they do show a lock and block. So is that going to be the wall, or is that just, what is that?
Why don't you hold that question for the next
Thank you.
hearing?
Okay.
Because right now,
Will
we've
do.
got to get on with the other business at the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, the expert is available on the 11th. He is not available on the other date, but perhaps in that hour, if we could get through all the questions, then we would maybe come back for the comment when my witness would no longer be required to be here.
Sounds like
I'm
a plan.
available on both days.
Do we need paperwork?
We
I consent to any extension of the hearing time and request that the chairman advise the community that I do not need to renotice for the continuation.
With the chairman's permission, it's my understanding that we're carrying this matter without further notice to the October 11 hearing, 7:30 PM in this same location, and that the applicant is going to provide an extension of time to act through at least the end of the month of October, if not longer.
Correct.
And that'll be in writing.
Yes, sir.
Can I have a motion to continue
So
the
moved
hearing?
as stated?
Hang on a second. Can we, what happens if you get the report from the soil analysis and stuff? Should we have that before we come back?
It was such an important part of everything. If we have that and can provide that information to you and
How about not if, how about we
We don't
do it
control
when? No, I get that. How about when?
Yeah, the only,
It's too important.
I can't promise all engineering design will be done based on that report, depending on when we get it, but we get the report, we will provide it to your board's expert.
I perhaps suggest that you would consider that and do something, because there's too much interest here. I got too many questions. I think there's too much open. You can't answer half the questions. My suggestion to you is that you come back better prepared. My suggestion.
I'll second Mr. Jones's motion.
All right, we have a motion to carry this hearing to October 11th with no prior notice. Let's have a vote.
Only if what I just said stands. I suggest you get that before you make a date suggestion.
I'd like that report.
You're only gonna have
Well,
an
yes,
hour.
but we are probably going to continue beyond the 11th, and so let's get the opportunity on the 11th for public questions of what we have heard so far before people forget what their question is. So we will meet on the 11th, and if we have to carry beyond that, we will.
I don't know about that. I kind of agree with Mr. Hands that
I'm sorry, we've
Have a month.
we've had this application now for a very long time, and
Yeah, but we're
we
missing-
can't,
we're missing information that I think we all want to hear before we can act on this.
Too much.
And if we don't have the report when the professional is no longer here,
Yes.
then we're going into November. So why not just carry it until we have that report?
because we cannot know when we have the report, and
Well, we
I'm not-
can't act on it until we do. So what's the difference?
Dennis, we only have an hour on October 11th anyway. We're gonna need more time than that anyway. Let's just move it to the
Agreed.
25th.
Agreed. Let's get the report.
You're gonna call everyone back, I guarantee you, on the 25th anyway.
Bring your architect too.
Yes.
With regard to bring the architect, no. Unless they're asking for specific construction details on the residence buildings, we don't need the architect. They're just showing us a
This meeting is still in order,
prototype.
Mr. Chairman. This meeting is still in order. We're not on a break yet.
I'm sorry.
I said we're not on a break yet. We're not having, entertaining public comment at this point.
Yeah.
Right? Yep, it's in order. Let's go.
We have a motion to carry this to October 11th for 1 hour. Let's vote on that, up or down, and then we decide whether or not we need a different plan. All in favor of carrying this to October 11th, raise your hand. Okay, let's hear a different proposal.
I think that proposal's already been made by Mr. Hand, so I second Mr. Hand's proposal.
Do we, if I may,
Restate the
legally,
proposal.
please,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah.
Legally, we need to have, under the MLUL, if we're going to carry this, which we must carry it, either with or without further notice, and I understand it's without further notice, we need to have a date, time, and place certain announced. So to
that's a
clarify the
stipulation.
motion, what is that date, time, and place?
October 25th.
I don't think the board professional
Chairman,
or
if I may
the
make a
professional
Right.
for the applicant is.
Or the first meeting in November, then.
Which is November,
Is there anything else on the
8th is what I
agenda on
have
the
on my calendar.
25th? Like, are you definitely having a meeting? We know you're having a meeting on the 11th, correct, Chairman?
correct.
Excuse me?
We know for certain you're having a meeting on the 11th.
We are having a meeting on the 11th with a short hearing.
Do we,
It will be a different application, but I don't expect it will take long.
are we certain that there would be a meeting on the 25th of October?
Yes, but you said your engineer can't make it.
Correct. But if we can carry the matter for purposes of noticing to one of those meetings and then have some type of check-in on the status of our additional engineering exhibits and information, the board chairman would then at that meeting be able to announce an additional continuation without the need for.
Well, if we
further notice.
carry it to November, the meeting in November is Election Day,
It is.
November 8th. Does that give anybody a problem?
Yep, I won't be there.
Yeah, it's election day. I don't know that, I think it's a holiday.
And the next
I'm a
meeting
poll worker, I won't be there.
after that is November 22, which is 2 days before Thanksgiving.
That's not a problem.
That's fine.
Carry to the 25th, and if you're not available, I'll request an adjournment.
Right, or we do the 11, if everything's in.
Let's let the applicant decide what he wants to do.
Or let's take 25th, but with the idea that I'm not available, I'm teaching you really big. It's the engineering, that's the issue. It's like, I'll get the results, I can then do something with that. I mean, 25th, plenty of time. Then if my other thing's canceled. Right.
You have a cancellation.
Should
If
not,
not, I'll
right.
check with Steve.
That's good, yeah, right.
Mr. Chairman, if we could carry the matter to October 25th, Mr. Seckler is hopeful that he'll be available, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to obtain the field work and work the calculations to present to the board that evening. If my expert is unavailable that evening, then we will seek another alternative, or I will present to the meeting, and we can request an additional continuation at that time. But a month, I think, should give us enough time to get it for everybody. And even if Matt's not available, at least you'll have it, and we have a date on the calendar. To
And-
not have a date is a.
And our professionals will have a
guaranteed
time
notice.
to review
Yeah.
Yeah.
and get it to us so that we can look at it, so we're
Yeah.
prepared for.
And could I just make another request that you bring the geotechnical engineer to explain the report that's going to be provided, so you're not acting as a messenger?
They don't, I could see if I could find one that wants to come to
Yeah.
a hearing. It's tough to get a geotechnical engineer at a board hearing. I'm just,
Oh, come on. I'm sure we could find something.
notice if they can't make
So-
25th?
Mr. Chairman, move to extend the application to October 25th with no further notice required.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So
Okay.
again, for the benefit of the public, this matter is being carried without further notice to October 25, 7:30 PM, the same location, and the applicant is providing an extension of time to act through at least the end of October, if not later. And we'll get that in writing. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a 5-minute recess for those of you who are waiting to leave. Thank you all for coming.
Check it out. You don't need a quorum for the next one.
I feel like
That's on your property? Is that what you
That
said?
was just one that I inspected.
Oh,
That's what a
okay.
drywall looks like. So that's a big concrete chamber with holes in it. And then see how it's backfilled around it with stone? And then there's a couple feet of stone underneath it. And so the whole middle of that structure is empty. And it's got holes in it so it can go out into the stone, which also.
And this is what they're gonna build in the seepage pit?
That is a seepage pit. That is a seepage pit. There will be multiple of those. So that's just one. They will have like.
Okay. And does grass eventually get planted?
Yep, so that whole thing, that entire structure will get covered in. You see that in the top? That's
I'm glad you showed me that. I'm like trying to picture it in my head.
I thought it was easier to show you.
Wordsmith and the visual guy.
So this is just a photo.
That's
of
3
the
weeks.
drywall or seepage pit that I
I'm gonna be gone 3 weeks, yeah.
So you can have the visualization. So that's just one thing. There tends to be several.
This may be yours.
Oh, okay, I was looking
I
for
don't want you
that.
to lose it, but I think this one's mine. I'll take this.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, go to think about it.
We are back in session at 10:13, and we're going to try to wrap up the last few items as quickly as possible.
Please.
First item I would like to talk about is the minutes of August 9th, which you got in the mail today. Any questions about those minutes or comments?
No issues?
If none, motion to approve?
Second?
At the,
I'm sorry.
But they would have to come from someone else, a board member, I believe.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't there.
A motion to approve the August 9th.
Thank you for that.
Before you pass a motion, I'd like to, at paragraph number 5, in the second line, strike the word "next." The discussion will be continued at the board's regular meeting on September 27th. Because this is the next meeting from the August 9th. Okay, where's that motion?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Done.
All right. The next issue is a discussion of noise. I sent you all an email a couple of days ago which outlined a problem that the town seems to be having with outdoor dining creating noise that affects neighbors. And the township suggested that maybe we would have an opinion on that. And so if you would like to volunteer for the Opinion on Noise Committee, please raise your hand.
I guess before we go there, is that really something that this board should be looking at?
Excuse me?
Is this something that should be before this board? The noise?
Well, the
ordinance?
question is if we approve outdoor dining in the course of approving a site plan, right now, the ordinance says there shall be no music with outdoor dining. There are 4 restaurants in town that there's 15 restaurants that seem to have outdoor dining, and 4 of them seem to have music. Whether it was pre-approved before long ago, like the hotel, for example, or whether it's just ad hoc since COVID, I don't know. But the question seems to be, if we permit outdoor dining, should we also permit music, and if so, what standards? And that would be the first time that a board has to approve outdoor noise. Otherwise, as I said in my email, noise just happens.
I go back to my question.
Right. I had the same question.
Let me ask another.
Well, the committee that I'm hoping to form would produce something. There's nothing to review right now other than the concept of how do we permit outdoor dining, music, and regulate it.
But isn't that, I don't get how that is a function of planning, period. I see that as policing.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't see it as planning.
that's where the noise is right now. Noise is in police right now, and I quoted the ordinance.
Well, why not leave it there?
But
Let them
the
leave it.
township committee seems to think that there is a zoning issue that we should be addressing. And I would like to know if anybody is eager to address it. I don't want to defend the fact that we have to do this. Are you willing to, is anybody willing to do it?
Just a quick question. I looked at NJDEP, has a noise model ordinance out there.
Yeah, right.
Is that something that normally goes, is that something the planning board has purview over?
I believe there there are performance standards in the Long Hill Code, which has noise as one of the things that are part of the performance standards, and they usually kick back to the state standard, which is, you know, certain level during the day, certain level during the
50
night.
dBA at night,
And
and
65
65
during the
dBA
day.
during the day.
Yeah, I know,
Right,
I read
right,
that.
right.
The difficulty with DBA standards, and
The property line.
Summit,
Indoor, outdoors.
Summit, Morristown, and Somerville have DBA standards in their ordinance. The smaller towns around us do not. And of course, the problem, like with radar detectors, is you've got to have certified test equipment and you got to have trained operators.
Yeah.
And they got to be available at 10 o'clock at night when the band starts playing at the restaurant across the street.
And it's based on residential neighbour, not
Yes,
commercial
apparently.
neighbour.
And a lot of the noise ordinances are really driven by the leaf blowing activity, and quite frankly, that got heightened when everybody started working from home, and all the landscapers showed up, and it's a cumulative thing, noise. So you get 3 leaf blowers going, it gets
I
even
don't
crazier.
want to discuss this or resolve it tonight. I only want to appoint a committee. Who wants to be on the committee?
I don't mind doing something on it if it falls under the purview of the board.
I mean, performance standards are in the land use code.
we're looking at
You want to be on the committee?
Me?
You.
Sure.
Does anybody want to
David,
be
you and
on the committee? Raise your hand.
I said yes, and Tom said yes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good.
No,
That's-
no,
I'm sorry,
I'm with you. No, I'm with you. I'm just a little, I'm gonna reserve myself here.
That should be.
Your only objective is to put a committee together and no discussion about any of this leading into. So when do we talk about it? We're gonna talk about it, but then we don't get any guidance until we come back with this. So we
Bring in a proposal.
Okay.
All right, so Tom and I will work, is it Tom and I?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Yes. That's proper
It
English.
sounds like a beer on the deck discussion.
Yeah, we're gonna sort that right out.
Don't be
Quiet,
too loud.
a very
Don't-
quiet
don't-
beer on the deck
Don't-
discussion.
don't-
With music on the deck.
That'll at least set the mood.
I wanted the
Thinking
mood
about
set,
it,
yeah.
the
I want-
zone.
yeah, exactly.
All right.
All right, the next item on the agenda is consistency. Ordinance 496-22, the Township Committee introduced this ordinance a month ago. They sent it to us to determine whether it is consistent with the master plan. There really isn't much discussion required because it's not consistent with the master plan. We know that because it endorses residential uses on Valley Road. So there is in front of you a letter from the board secretary to the township committee, which states that. This is not consistent with the master plan, but we recommend you do it anyway.
I'm sort of okay, but I'm not okay with extended stay hotel. We've talked about that enough. I will not approve this or discuss this with extended stay hotel as a concept. The other stuff, okay, because it's more residential, it's living. Extended hotel is not that.
Agreed.
So I would strike extended hotel out of this.
Assisted living is an extended hotel for seniors.
Yeah, but it's living, that's not just 1 month. I assume it's just living is more of a longer term.
Yeah, I'd say no to all.
You say no to, that's fine, that's fine. I'm just saying, I would say no to extended stay hotel anyhow. What does anybody else say then? Tom, you said no.
Now, coming on the heels of this ordinance, there is another one coming up at our next meeting, which is an overlay zone specifically for the car wash. And as you may recall, the zoning board approved a residential development on Plainfield Road a couple of months ago, because, again, as a variance, a use variance from our ordinance. And so the question is the time right to declare some, not all, but some residential uses in the Valley Business District in order to avoid variances and overlay zones? And that's what this ordinance seeks to do. And as I said, on the face of it, it is not consistent with the master plan, but we recommend that the township committee adopt it anyway.
I'm saying not with extended hotels, stay hotel. I would not approve this, so. And Tom said something a little bit different.
No with any of it.
None of it. Anybody?
I would strike extended stay hotel also. I don't think it's appropriate for what we're trying to do with the rest of this.
I'm sorry, what was it you would strike, Alan?
Extended stay hotel.
Oh,
It doesn't seem to fit with the other, with nursing homes or,
well, we already allow a small hotel.
I'm just saying with this wording, I wouldn't vote to approve this either. I mean, I don't know if we have to approve it. We have to,
Maybe Liz or I can explain the master plan consistency.
go ahead.
And
Go ahead,
the
Steve.
scope of the authority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Great.
One of us quickly. As the board may know, the governing body introduces and adopts ordinances,
Right.
of course, and our job primarily on a master plan consistency review with the benefit of the planning, our planners' input, which you have in the memo, is to first and foremost recommend, advise the governing body whether we find the ordinance to be consistent or inconsistent. It appears as if the board may be concluding, based upon the planner's testimony and their own knowledge, that it's inconsistent. So that's really the primary.
Right.
Beyond that, it's you have the authority to make recommendations as to other matters, and if you want to add to your inconsistency finding, a recommendation as to other matters, then you and the chair and can decide what else you might want to recommend that's, relevant to it. Just a reminder, regardless of what the board does, the governing body can still go forward and adopt on a second reading with public hearing. They would simply have to have an effective majority, a majority of the entirety of the governing body, no matter how many are there, as well as a reasons resolution is what we refer to it as, just explaining why it is that notwithstanding the inconsistency finding of the planning board, the governing body nonetheless is adopting the ordinance. So that's your statutory scope and charge.
Thank
Sure. So, I find it inconsistent.
Now,
And
what the
suggestion is-
residential type uses that are in this ordinance do not include apartment houses like we approved in Gillette, across from the post office for Elite. That would not be automatically a part of the uses in this ordinance.
It's like,
This
it's
is
like
the,
a house that you rent out.
say again?
They're like a house you rent out. There are homes that are rented out, just like the apartments across, over in Gillette that you just
Well, the
mentioned.
homes that are rented out in Valley Road are grandfathered.
On Valley Road, there's one on, I think that's Gates that crosses over Mountain.
Well, this also says that there's no residence on the first floor.
Correct, and I think that's what you were maybe referring to, like the Elite project, for example, is 100% residential,
Right.
and this doesn't permit 100% residential.
Mm-hmm.
You can have residential,
On the second
actually,
floor.
at
We
15
can have
units per
mixed-use
acre.
buildings,
Place next to-
and like the one on Plainfield Road that was
Right.
approved a few months ago as a mixed-use building.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I think the extended stay hotel is more like a, the products, I'm not gonna get the names wrong, but like the suites, like the Holiday Inn
Yeah,
suites.
Homewood Suites.
They all have them.
They're like studios. You move in, you got a bed, you got a living quarters, you got a
Kitchen.
kitchenette.
Right.
Yeah.
So where does that leave us? I think it's
Our
inconsistent.
recommendation is to remove that.
Good.
All right, so Dennis, are you looking for us to make recommendations tonight, or are you gonna do the similar?
The,
like-
the final hearing on this is tomorrow night at the Township Committee. They need our recommendation overnight. And the problem is, the calendar. The planning board has 35 days to render its decision. Well, the problem is, our meetings were 5 weeks apart, and the Township Committee meetings were 5 weeks apart, and there's the 35 days. So we've got to decide on this tonight and send it back to the Township Committee overnight.
So we have a letter to the municipal clerk dated September 13th, saying that based on the above, we find it's inconsistent with the township's master plan. So that's done, but we can then, as our board council stated before, that we can also recommend in this letter, as an addendum to this letter, that the board recommends striking the extended stay hotel use as part of this ordinance.
Well, we can take that out. We can recommend that we take that out.
Exactly, exactly, and that's all we can do. But, so let's do that, and
Okay, is there anything else that anyone would like to take out other than extended stay hotel?
Assisted living, continuing care, and nursing home.
Well, nursing home is gonna come up.
Can we get clarity on apparent apartments other? What is other? On page 3 in the box down below.
Oh, that's, apartments other is existing, and as the parking ordinance now reads, apartments are worth 2 parking spaces anywhere in town. And so this creates additional categories other than anywhere else in town.
So this addresses parking. This is addressing parking.
For parking.
Section 9 is
Okay.
parking.
Then I'd also strike extended stay hotel in that section too.
It would have to be
It would
struck
probably,
throughout.
yeah.
There's a
Yeah,
definition, there's,
good.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So it'd be a word search and destroy, right?
yeah.
Essentially.
The other thing is, actually, now that I'm seeing this, board doesn't have to know this, but the independent living, if that was permitted, which I think it is, that doesn't have a parking standard.
well, independent living is a regular apartment.
But it's,
Independent living is different from assisted living.
no, I know.
Does it allow residents?
And we are not saying independent living in this ordinance that's coming to us from the township.
Well, that's what we all do right now, is live independently. I mean,
Well, I don't know about
No.
you.
No, all right.
forget I said it right.
Well, I
Yeah,
think,
mean, that's fine. If you want it to fall under the category of apartment, that's fine. I just didn't know if I keep losing it. What are the conditional use standards though?
I don't know.
Okay. That's fine. I mean, if they don't meet the conditional use standards, they have to come before.
That's good to go. There's cable TV up there, so.
one meeting, please.
I have the same right.
One meeting, please.
So do we need to include independent living in this?
Well, I don't know what independent living is. I think I do that.
Then let's not add it.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was thinking that it might not meet the conditional use standards that are in here, but I think that's okay.
Okay,
So I think it could fall under the umbrella of apartments.
thank you.
I think independent living is sort of what they call the senior thingies down by the shore, where you
Yeah.
have a golf course and so on, but at least you're within the fence.
Mr.
a
Warner, is
50
there
part
an
of the
actual
house.
definition in the MLUL for independent?
I don't know, but we're not talking about that. We're only talking about assisted living and nursing home,
Continuing care, yeah.
and continuing care
See, that's-
residential.
Okay, so that's where it comes in, sorry. Continuing care usually includes independent living, but I think it's okay. I think you're fine.
No, we don't. We're not taking up new business.
No, new business.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's up.
We started it before.
Independent.
Yeah.
So I could leave anytime.
Yeah, yes, that's right. So it is in the definition for CCRC, but I think that's fine. I think all the standards are fine. We don't need to mess with them. It's okay.
Why can't we just give a yes or no vote? It's not consistent with the master plan, and then let the township committee do what they're gonna do anyway with
And
it.
then kick it back to us. That's what they'll end up.
Well, the township committee is going to adopt this. There's no question about it. They're going to adopt it tomorrow night, regardless of what we say. So the best we can hope for is to get our 2 cents in. And part of that is,
Alan said it. It's inconsistent, and a recommendation to remove extended stay hotel.
Yeah, yes, and then
yeah,
there's,
let me make that note, because I'm gonna have to send this out overnight.
well, do you want me to make I can make the changes right now.
Yeah,
I can make the changes right now and email it to you.
perfect.
Well, whatever, whatever.
You're the best.
I know.
Yes.
Is there anything else that we should delete from the proposed ordinance other than extended stay hotel?
No.
Okay.
Do we have a motion?
Motion?
So motion as stated.
The motion would be to
Say it's
advise the township committee that the board finds it inconsistent with the master plan per the letter.
correct with the recommendation to remove extended stay hotel.
Right.
Correct.
That is the motion.
Second.
Thank you, Alan.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Opposed?
Yes, sir.
All opposed?
Oh, you're opposed?
Yeah.
6-1.
I think they should.
One, two, three.
we
I'm
should
sorry,
send it back.
5-1.
Said that.
5-1.
3, 4, 5.
Tom, you're opposing?
Yeah.
I like when you go against the grain.
I never go against it. Tom, it's always you.
Make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair?
Yes, but I just want to get into the record, into the video, that Ms. Dill did not rejoin us after the break at 10:15.
I have it in the roll.
You have that written down? Okay. All right, in that case, I will entertain a motion. Oh, next meeting will be master plan.
Yep. Good. You got a meeting.
Sounds good.
Y'all come.
You'll be here.
Do it.
All right, who,
Motion to adjourn.
all in favor? say
second.
aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all for coming.
Turn off that